All right, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 18th, 2025 South Burlington City Council meeting. We will start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, and who would like to lead it today? Stephen would like to lead it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oops, I lost my chair. Thank you. We will now go to instructions on exiting the building in case of emergency and review of technology options. Jesse Baker, City Manager.
Thank you. So if there are people in the room, I would say go up the right and left. For the folks joining us remotely, thank you for joining us. If you would like to speak during any item on the agenda, you can turn the camera on and the chair will call on you, or you can indicate that you'd like to speak in the chat and I will have the chair call on you. Other than that, we are not monitoring the chat for content.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of the agenda tonight? I've heard requests to try and move any executive sessions to after Colin arrives, which should be about 8 p.m.
So it's a little hard to do this because you have sub-executive sessions tonight. Yeah. So if so what I would recommend is that you add an executive session. Well, if you want, you add an executive session to item 13, which is the city manager's review, and add that to the very end of the agenda. Okay. And then you move item 19, which is the discussion of the N.R.C.C. members, up to wherever 8 o'clock lands.
Okay. Instead of item 10.
So item 10. 10 is the Underwood. Yeah. Okay. So move it in that area.
Yeah.
Quick question, Jesse. Are we needing to do an executive session on your performance review again? No. Right?
I think that we are going to do it, but it'll be at the very end.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully you know enough about what I think to not need me there, but I hate to miss review conversations.
Well, let me ask a question. Is it possible we could do that at the next city council meeting and wait?
Can you turn your mic on?
Can we do that at the next city council meeting and wait to issue the review till then? Is there a rush to do that?
So I'm fine with you not publicly voting on a review until after town meeting day. I think you may want to clarify for the public, given other news happening in the state, that you are fine-tuning a review and not necessarily considering ending my contract.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think you may want to make some kind of public statement about why you're meeting again in executive session. But if you wanted to do that and then move it to March 6th, that's fine.
The reorganization meeting? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Does that?
I think, because it would be good to have Lori there, and I can appreciate that it's getting really late for vacation. So,
yeah. So why don't we?
It would be.
Go ahead.
It would be good to have Mike. It would be good to have Mike there as well. And do you need a motion to what Jesse just suggested?
No, I don't think so.
No, you should take it off this agenda and put it on a future agenda.
Right.
And Mike will be here at 7. He's just coming back from a...
But at item 13, if you want us to talk about why we're going to defer it to March 6th, we can do that.
Okay, we can do it that way too.
Okay.
Yeah. Or we could say that publicly now. I just want to make sure it's covered.
So we still also have executive sessions for item number 12, 14, 18.
14 and 18. Well, why don't we see what happens at item 10? And if we're at that point, then we can just squish all those up. We'll move them up.
Could we move item 10 then later? Because I could guess that there may be public interest in item 11, and to push that really late would be maybe not great.
Oh, to push item 10 down to
Yeah.
bring 11 up?
No, to kind of squeeze the executive sessions where in the 10 slot, move 10 down.
Move 10 down and,
Yeah.
and put executive sessions first, ahead of 10.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I just, I don't know if the Underwoods are going to be, oh, the 10 is this, oh, that's the city, yeah, Underwood. I don't know if they're going to want to, if they're going to be here to attend to that on remotely or, I don't know how much time that's going to take. Yeah,
Recording in progress.
He's doing it.
okay.
Is it public forum yet?
No, we're still on agenda review.
Okay, great.
So we're in agreement to try and squeeze all those executive sessions in at around 10, item 10.
I'm wondering if we could, leave the ones discussing the contracts, 14 and 18, where they are. Is that okay, Laurie?
That's totally fine with
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
Just leave those on.
And I'm
Yeah.
sorry to complicate the order.
So right, move up the N.R.C.C.
Yep.
and item 12, the litigation settlement, and leave the other stuff.
So 12 and 19, just 12 and 19, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No other agenda changes? Okay, then. We're going to go on to comments and questions from the public not related to tonight's agenda. Are there any from the people online? Any hands raised online?
I don't know where the hand raise is, but I'm here.
Okay. All right. So then there are no.
No, Karen
Oh,
Seaton.
Karen. Oh, you do? I see it. Okay. Karen, you want to turn your camera on so we can see you and hear you?
Yeah, Jesse knows my rule. Unless I look like a supermodel, I'm not one to really show my face, but they know me. I'm the prettiest Black woman that's ever existed out of South Burlington, educated from South Burlington. But today I'm in my whole wifey look, so I'm just not interested. Okay, can I move on now to the more important factors? They already know I'm pretty.
I didn't quite understand what you said because you were
Karen,
talking.
could you just slow
You
down? It's hard to
understood,
understand
sir. I
what you're
just would like
saying.
to speak. Yeah, you understood because you're a smart man, unless your mother says otherwise. I'm just here to talk about what is on the agenda. You said comments, right? I'm here as a public here with a comment. Can I say my comment?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I grew up in South Burlington, Rick Marcos Central School, Tuttle, all of it. SB graduate. And so much I am suffered from South Burlington of what they have done to me. It's probably part of the litigation. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things. First, I want to do my undeniable support to Lydia Diamond because we need a Black woman. And I've been a Black woman who has lived in South Burlington all my life, and I know what they will do to destroy your life and then go skiing for the weekend. I know what it's like to be a Black woman in Vermont, for them to be so threatened by your abilities instead of being like, wow, we can actually have someone that we can say, this person grew up with us. But they don't want that. Why? Because you're Black, because you're a woman. And we need representation. So I'm glad to see Lydia Diamond, and she's an example of how Black women don't give up, whether it's through court litigation, no matter what they say about us, no matter how they try to discredit us, we don't give up and we keep going. So one, I want to support Lydia Diamond. Two, I want to talk about Karen Sperry, the dentist who's right across from South Burlington, how that woman has intentionally, maliciously gave me a bad dental job because of pure envy and jealousy. And that's the kind of things that Black students in South Burlington had to deal with. And I hope that when we get a Black representative, we can have Black women be able to speak up on the behalf of their children instead of suffering in silence has happened for years, or examples of biracial children who are so confused because they don't know who they are because this city has chosen to fail them every single day. So, again, I'm supporting Lydia Diamond. I'm talking about the litigation that I have filed on my own because I am that girl. Forever it will be and always will be that girl. And I'm eternally protected by God. So that's why I continuously am prospering no matter what this city has done. And I just want to make that very clear that we are survivors. We will survive. And there is none like a chocolate queen who knows her worth. I rest my time.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Karen. Susan Gray, you have your camera
It's
on.
Karen. That's why you've never seen it in your life. It's Keren. Truly one
We
of a
see that
kind.
on
There is
our
no
on
other.
our displays that it's Keren.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yeah,
Different as they come. Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you. And Susan Gray, you have your camera on. Did you want to speak?
No, I'm here for the noise ordinance because we are all desperate.
Okay,
not
so
to
you don't want to speak right now because we're not on that agenda item, but right now is the time for
no,
public comment for
I'm
things.
here to listen.
Okay, so just please turn your camera off until you want to speak.
Okay,
And Susan, just FYI, that item is scheduled right now for 8:25, although we made a few agenda item revisions, and it may well go past then. So just FYI.
okay, thank you.
And no other comments. Nobody's hands up. All right. Okay, moving on to item 5, which is Councilors Announcements and Reports on Committee Assignments, and then the City Manager's Report. Elizabeth?
All right, thank you. The Housing Committee did meet last week, and a rep was assigned to the Open Space and Parks Master Plan as requested, and Vince Bolduc will be the representative from the Housing Committee. Fair Housing Month is in April, and there is a book discussion that's being recommended. The book title is On the Housing Crisis by an author, Jerusalem Demsas, who writes for The Atlantic. And has a series of chapters in the book on different elements of the housing crisis. So that'll be a book discussion and scheduled in, I think we're talking about April 16th. The committee is talking about scheduling that. The committee met primarily for some review on the trust background, which I forwarded on to council by way of background. And then I also participated in the Champlain Housing Trust annual meeting, which was held last week, I think Thursday, which was another snowy day. And a couple of upcoming things, conversation with counselors scheduled at Orchard this coming Saturday at 9 a.m. It may be just me based on people's availability, but I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to discuss that. And then there's a meet and greet with all the council candidates scheduled for Thursday, the 27th at the Digital Lab on the second floor of the library from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And those are my updates.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Andrew?
It's possible I may be able to join you on Saturday. So we had a Sexton meeting where Laura and I joined, and we worked on primarily the document which defines governance of the cemeteries and the respective roles of the sextons and the city. I think there'll be a few more sessions to go through that, but we're making good progress, and I think the sextons are happy that we're going through that. I also with Laurie met with Nick Longo at the airport. Lots of exciting things happening there. Nick, went through the data surrounding the airport, their flights and passenger miles, and how the airport ranks in the Northeast, which is just the second, I think, behind Logan. He walked us through their expansion plans. I think the new terminals are going to be gorgeous. The plans look great. We also talked about their climate action plan, and then Nick and we talked about the bike path, the shared use path that they're proposing to build in their airport road. So we had a really lively discussion, and Nick shared that he would love to come before the full council and go through a lot of the information that Laurie and I talked about with him. So hopefully we can arrange that. I've reached out to him to say thank you, and that on behalf of the council, that would probably make sense. So that'd be good. And then Tim and I had a conversation with a counselor. Sparse attendance, but lively conversation. A lot about our favorite topic of conservation and housing and Longview. We talked a bit about F-35s, and I'm sure we will continue those conversations.
Thank you. Lori, did you want to report on what you did?
I I don't have my notes with me, so I don't have much to report other than what Andrew shared, and we'll have more to say at our next meeting.
Okay. All right. So I attended 2 extra city council meetings last week. And also there was a BCA meeting for a lot of the newer justices of the peace, which I am not one, but it was also an organizational meeting. And also the S.B.P.O.A had their morning meeting at City Hall where Violet Nichols from the school district presented her budget, and our city manager, Jesse Baker, presented the city budget. I also then, like Andrew said, attended a coffee with the counselor at the Chamberlain School. We had 3 people show up, and we did have a lot of discussion about the Long property and F-35s. I also met with our climate director, Bettina, last week for about an hour and a quarter. Lively discussion, lots of ideas, both directions. Really going to be interesting to see what happens with that. I also was on the Channel 17 candidate forum last Wednesday evening for 20 minutes, and since there was nobody else there except me because I'm running unopposed, they decreased the number of questions and there was a longer period of time to answer. There were no calls that came in either. And I also got to go see the UVM women destroy Maine finally again after losing to them about 65-20. It was a good game, and Black Bears went home with their tails between their legs. And I just came from a public arts committee meeting just before I came here. So that's all I have to report. Jesse?
Yes, thank you. So can we go back to conversation with the counselor for just a quick minute?
Sure.
So as Elizabeth had said, the 227 amended conversation with the counselor to meet the candidates. We started publication of that today. It's up on our social media. If folks want to share that, they can. For Saturday, Andrew, do you want us to put you down or not? Or you'll be a surprise guest if you can make it.
I think it's. I mean, yeah, we are leaving to Montreal, but I should be able to see it. So.
Okay.
But let's just.
Andrew, if you can't, I may be able to make it also. I will be back
If
then.
you know what, if you're gonna be definitely back and you can do it, Lori, that would be great. I was gonna squeeze it in if no one else could.
I'm pretty sure I can do it, so put me down, Jesse.
Okay, great.
Okay. And
See
then
you Saturday, Elizabeth.
and then that is the 22nd is our last regularly scheduled one. So at some point, maybe during your organizational meeting, you should have a conversation about if we want to move to monthly or a different model or whatnot. So heads up that's coming at that meeting. Want to let you know that the annual reports, good timing, Andy, the annual reports and the budget books are now available. If folks they're on the website if you want to look at the electronic version, or they're with the city clerk's office and library if people want to come in and look at hard copies. Early voting is up and running, has started. It is going rather slowly, so if folks can encourage folks to come out, that would be great. This week our economic development strategic planning consultants are in the city. So just as a reminder, the S.B.P.O.A is holding a listening session with them on Thursday morning at 8:30 in the library, and then we're holding a community workshop for the general public that night at 6 in this room. We are also working on community listening sessions about parking in City Center in March, so you'll start seeing advertisements for those as well. We have over 200 animal licenses that have been registered through the online permitting system, which is great. People are using it, and Holly is reporting that as the bugs are worked out, it is saving some significant staff time, which is great. Bettina is working with some commercial and residential multi-unit housing developers and owners on the technology for renewable source hot water heaters to see if that technology has improved. The exemption for that in the ordinance has now expired as of Friday. So we're looking at what's possible, and we may bring you an update on that in March and April. Unfortunately, the federal elective pay program appears to be offline. So we are following federal announcements about that.
The what again?
The federal elective pay program, which is so we are hoping it will turn back on at some point, but we are not sure at the moment.
What does that do?
What does that
That's-
program govern?
So under the IRA, organizations that don't pay taxes, like us, are eligible to claim commercial credits by submitting under the selective pay program for basically a grant. So we were hoping to do that for, I guess, many of the things the city's been working on.
And then just on fun events, we had 75 neighbors come to hear Catherine Patterson at the library last week, and 130 neighbors come to the Valentine's Day dance. Very cute. And there are a huge number of youth and adult programming registrations open online, so really encourage folks to check out those offerings. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mike, did you have some announcements?
Sure. Thank you very much, Tim. And Lori, thank you for giving me the whole desk so I could spread out here. This morning I attended the board session for this Green Mountain Transit. Just the highlights out of that are that based on the government, the proposed budget currently at the state level, and based on some of the reimagining and the service cuts that have been made, it looks like the gap, at least for 2026 fiscal year, that is about only 500,000 now, thanks to some additional funds from the state as part of the transit bill. And that means that the main reductions that going forward as of this summer would be reducing timing of the routes, of the 4 core routes during the summer from usually to making the intervals a little bit longer, and also would mean probably not having the 11 on Sundays. Now, these are all out for public discussions, so the public will hear about it and have a chance to comment. But the bulk of the savings will come from substantially reduced overtime payments incurred in the summer and weekends when the overtime payments for drivers are the highest in terms of meeting the current service needs. However, that doesn't change the reality of fiscal year 2027, which is still looking at between $2.5 million and $3 million in a fiscal gap. So the process and the legislature paper, which is, I think, public on the GMT website, outlines the additional steps that need to go forward to try to get to that sustainable service that we're all looking for. Another big unknown factor is federal funding. There are a lot of changes in federal funding, and at the moment there is no clear guidance from Region 1, which is what GMT is a part of in terms of geographic, in terms of how and if and how the criteria for federal funding for public transit will take place. That means there has to be caution in making decisions going forward. For example, we're on the cusp of making a decision about additional $8 million purchases of electric buses. But if those funds don't arrive and we've committed to buying those buses, then we all collectively are on the hook for that money. So obviously, until there's some clarity on that, some sort of capital decisions will have to be put on hold. Just as a matter of fact, the GMT, in terms of ridership, if you talk about the urban section of it, accounts for 57% of all ridership in the state of Vermont, which was interesting. But in terms of budgets of collectively of all the public transits, it only is 20% of funds spent on public transit. So there were just sort of interesting data that came out of today's meeting. But that's it. Thanks very much. Oh, yes, one other thing I listened in on the Economic Committee, Development Committee meeting, and I have to commend the committee and the liaison and the staff that were involved in selecting I guess it's consultant who's doing the study. I was really impressed by their skill set, by the breadth of their interests and their willingness to get input and have this, whatever study that comes out, strategic vision comes out, is aligned with the community. So it is a sort of a win-win for everyone. So it was really kudos to everyone involved in choosing them. And I really encourage people to attend their various listening sessions because that's how we'll get the best product.
And thank you, Mike. I neglected to mention that, but I agree with your assessment.
And Mike, who won the basketball game?
My son's team.
Thank you very much. And I forgot to announce, because nobody else did, that if you look in the hallways, there's a brand new hanging for the new art show. There are 2 artists that are featured, and if you have time, at 5:30 on Thursday, there will be a reception for the artists. So please come if you can. All right, so we'll move on to item 6, which is the consent agenda. We have Part 6A, which is consider and sign disbursements for the water warrants and the AP warrants. 6B, which is approve the minutes from September 11th of 2024, September 16th, 2024, October 7th, 2024, October 21st, 2024, November 4th, 2024, and November 18th, 2024. And also 6C, which is award the ash tree removal project to Teachers Tree Service. Can I have a motion to approve these?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I have discussion. I was amazed at the 12-cent difference on the on the bid.
Very, very
And I was like,
precise.
well, at least they went back to this, the original bid price. So I was watching that very closely because I didn't know if the 12 cents was going to make a big difference or not, but I'm glad that we have it. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
And so it's unanimous. Thank you very much, Lori. Moving on to item 7, which is hold interviews for committee appointments to the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee. And we had 3, but I think 1 dropped. Can't be interviewed tonight.
Right. No, it dropped.
See?
So,
Right. But
yes, so one of the ones you previously interviewed has withdrawn.
right.
One of the candidates was not available for either interview time. That is,
This one here, I think.
yes, that's Kayla Moore.
Right.
And then Grace is online and Beth is here.
Okay. So why don't we start with Beth, because you're already here. Come on down. Good evening. And just make sure that the little green light is bright when you push the base of that microphone.
Got it.
That's great. And make sure you're pretty close to the microphone too.
Yep.
So good evening. And thank you for applying to be on the N.R.C.C. You want to give us some background information about you first?
I'll try to make it relevant. I'm a physician over at UVM Medical Center, and I'm a long-term advocate for natural resource protection and action on the climate crisis, which is the biggest health threat that we face. So these initiatives dovetail with my day job and with my passion of, protecting the natural world. And I think that's laid out in my statement to you all. Yeah. If you have any questions, I don't want to make it longer than it has to be. So.
Sure. We have some basic questions we usually go through, and I'll just ask them, then I'll let the council join in with other ones. Have you had a chance to attend any N.R.C.C. meetings at all?
I have not, largely because my day job is very demanding. I've reached a turning point in that because I'm, reaching sort of like the end of the line when it comes to promotion. So at least I hope. So that should make it more possible for me to get involved in community work like this. And I have some other responsibilities at the hospital, which were volunteer efforts that I've recently stepped away from. So. Yeah. So
But you will, when they meet and how often, and you'll be able to make those meetings?
they meet Monday nights once a month, and yes, I will be able to make those meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll open up to the council. Any council questions at all?
Hi, Beth. I just want to mention, I know Beth to be really committed to this city and its well-being. Among other things, Beth was impetus for setting up a meeting with Beta to talk about how to phase out lead in their small airplanes, and it was very successful, so I thank her for that. Beth, are there particular things that you'd like to accomplish as part of the N.R.C.C., particular policy or particular ideas?
In general, I think that there needs to be maybe a stronger eye towards climate resilience, and I know that we're making huge strides on that because the city now has a hired climate. I can't remember what the exact title is. Climate
Actions
manager.
manager. Yeah.
Yeah, which is incredible. So I would look forward to leaning on that person's expertise in ways that we can strengthen our natural resource protection as the city moves down this path of, providing more housing for people. So that I think that's a very sensitive, very delicate balance to strike. I think we've done it really well so far. And it will take a lot of collaboration and expertise to make that happen the right way, because we are facing a crisis of untold proportions. If anyone is reading about this issue in the scientific literature, we're all in a lot of trouble, and we need to do everything we can to protect our communities, especially the people who are most vulnerable, who are, I'm not necessarily one of them, but we need to do what we can. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Elizabeth?
I just wanted to ask if, somewhat relevant to the assignment on this committee, but also because of your background, what do you think some of the challenges are in terms of equity as it relates to service on this committee?
Oh, where to start? I guess I'll give some examples. Folks living in the more densely populated and lower lying parts of the city would be more vulnerable to extreme weather events like flooding, et cetera. So I would think that on a natural resources committee, you would want to look for ways to, protect those folks in times of unforeseen or even foreseen weather-related events, climate-related events. Along the same lines, urban heat island effect. I know I'm going probably beyond the mission of the Natural Resources Committee, but also, climate resilience efforts in terms of having cooling centers and that sort of thing, or places where people can go when we have extreme heat events. So I think anything to do with natural resources is basically very much tied up in the impacts of climate change on our community. We've been lucky here so far in South Burlington, but we have to be ready for that. And the natural world is one of our greatest bulwarks against those impacts. So, yeah.
Mike?
Thank you. I share with you your view that we've been very fortunate to get a climate director. Now that I think we've all met her, we would say not only is it a great position, but we've got a great person in the position. I'll ask the same question I've asked every other candidate to keep it the same. One of our goals in the community, in our city plan, is equity and creating equal opportunity across all fields. And one of that is also about the access to nature, or as you started to touch on, the same sort of protections that are necessary to hopefully never have to deal, but if we have to deal with the climate change challenges, that they have the sort of same sense of protection or same sense of shared empathy from the city council and actions from the city budget to address it. So any ideas on how you would see the committee carrying out sort of this inclusive aspect to our great nature that we have in South Burlington?
Well, what I've learned in my travels in climate and health equity, which is a major focus of this organization that I volunteer for called the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. You can look them up, and their major focus is on climate and health equity. I would say that the way that I've learned to approach problems like that is to actually talk to the people who are experiencing those impacts or experiencing the phenomenon of inequity. I don't come to this with the attitude that I know what the solutions are. I think it's important to actually talk to people and see what they think the solutions are. So that's my best answer that I can give you to that question. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good answer.
Beth, what do you think the biggest natural resource challenge is for the city right now?
Well, I think it's the same one that the whole world is facing. We're facing pressure to continue to build. But we have to stop destroying. We have to stop destroying existing land that hasn't been developed, because there's a dwindling amount of that land, and we just can't afford to keep ruining unprotected land, or land that's still in a natural state. So I understand there has to be a balance between economic development and housing and preservation of natural resources, but I think our community is sort of at a juncture where we're being pushed to destroy what little we have left of open space. So I think it's very important that we look at that very, very carefully before we steamroll ahead and start, I don't know. I mean, I know there was the recent issue of the Long property. I may be getting the name wrong because I think of Long Drive, which is right next to my house. So I think that's the challenge: is how do we balance affordable housing needs and the need for economic growth with preservation of our extremely precious, rapidly dwindling natural environment, which is really one of the only things that is going to stand in the way of us. Maybe not next year, maybe not in the next 10 years, but for our children and our grandchildren, the only thing that's really going to be a strong barrier against the climate impacts that are surely coming. So yeah, that's
Great. And last question that I have, unless the councilors have any questions, is what skill do you bring as a being on that committee as a team that you think a strength that would help the committee in terms of how you would interact with other committee members?
I was just working on my promotion dossier today, so I could list the 10,000 committees I've served on in my career. So I have a lot of committee experience, and I'd be happy to share with you some details. I've chaired committees. I'm chairing a national committee right now. I've been a member of many committees. And I work every day in teams of people, with other physicians in other disciplines, technologists in my own department. So, yeah, I have had a lot of experience with teamwork.
Great. And do you have any questions for the council about this process?
I have.
Lori, sorry, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead, Lori.
It's okay. I'm hiding back here. Hi, Beth. I want to start by saying that I do know Beth, and she did contribute to my campaign. I don't see that as having any impact, but I want that to be upfront. And I have two questions for you, Beth. One, being a resident in the Southeast Quadrant, which is sometimes spoken of a little bit disparagingly as being the affluent section that has all the conserved land. How would you be addressing the concerns for the whole city as a member of the N.R.C.C. versus a member of the Southeast Quadrant?
Hi, Lori.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, so first, I just want to point out, and maybe I'm not understanding the maps correctly, but the largest piece of preserved land in the city of South Burlington is Red Rocks Park. And that is not in the Southeast Quadrant as far as I can tell. So I just want to put that out there. It's not like all the preserved open space is in the Southeast Quadrant. So, I think that we live in a small city, and people for some reason have been pitted against one another on this issue. I frequently go to Red Rocks Park, and I go down to Farrell Park, and those are not in my quadrant, but I still get to enjoy all that beautiful open space. I go to Red Rocks Park frequently, in fact. I visit Red Rocks more than I visit any of the other places, the ones that are closest to me. So I would, again, say that the way to handle that perception that, somehow all the open space is in the southeast quadrant, which it's factually it's not, is to have a dialogue about it and not, go down the path that we've gone down nationally and pit ourselves against one another, but try and have a rational conversation about, okay, well, where are things really and what's left? What remains for us to preserve? And that's what we should be trying to preserve. So I would also say that I'm not studied on these issues yet, but I am a very diligent student. So, on the committee, I would spend some time to fully educate myself on the details of the issues that arise. So, yeah.
Great. And the other question that I have for you is, right now we are undergoing both a parks and an open space planning process. And there is at times a tension between recreational parks and the desire for parks and the open space and natural resource conservation. And as these two plans are developing, if you're on the committee, how would you work to balance that tension?
Honestly, Lori, I would have to learn the details of the issues. I'm not up on it. So I would have to spend some time poring over the documents and educating myself, and I'd have to get back to you with an answer on that one.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And that's it for me.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Lori. Do you have any questions for us on process at all?
I don't want to take up too much time because I know you guys have a long agenda. I guess the question is, who's on the committee, staying on the committee? I know some of the folks who are there people who are stepping down, and then those who get chosen for the committee are going to replace them, or are you not allowed to share that information?
Good question.
So it's a 9-member committee. There are 5 members remaining on the committee, so they are meeting a quorum. Interestingly, this last appointment cycle, we had far fewer applicants than we've had in the past. So we didn't have enough applicants last round to fill all the vacancies there were, which is part of why there are these interim vacancies. Jean-Sebastian is the chair. He's actually on the Zoom now. And I can read down the other members if you'd like. John
Bosange, I know, is on the committee.
Michelle Corpos, Larry Kupferman, Lisa, and Catherine is on a leave of absence, I believe.
Okay.
Those are the people on there.
And the committee makes recommendations to the council. Is that how it works? It's like any of the other, where it's basically just an independent body that comes in and presents information and
Policy advising to the
recommendations.
council.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have any other questions. If I
Well-
do, I will reach out to Jean. I know he's on the call.
Great. So I think we're going to go into executive session tonight to make some decisions, and then we'll come out and vote in public on these appointments later on. So you'll find out one way or the other.
Yep, sounds great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Beth.
So next we have Grace, I'm going to say Lecky. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Yay.
Make sure you hear me and see me.
We can hear you and see
Hi.
you. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good. Nice to meet all of you.
Same here. Thank you so much for applying. We really appreciate it because we like to get a lot of applications, so we have a nice big pool to choose from. So do you want to give us a little background information?
Yeah, so I grew up here. I moved here when I was around 11 from Minnesota, which is very big downsize. And then I went to FHUMass in South Burlington High School. And in 2023, I graduated from the University of Connecticut with a natural resources and wildlife conservation degree. And I'm back here now.
Have you had a chance to attend any of these meetings online or in person?
I have not as of yet. I did talk to Jean a little bit about how the process works. I just unfortunately haven't been able to attend.
Okay, and so you understand when they meet and how often, and you're able to meet that time commitment?
Yes, yes, I am.
Have you had any other public service type experience before?
Not in terms of an official appointment to a committee or anything. I've done community service work through the high school, and I was a member of some public clubs and things during that time, but no, I haven't joined any type of public sector in the official capacity.
Great. And what do you do? Do you do something now in your job as a natural resources now, or?
No, unfortunately, no. I've been looking. Right now, well, I mean, I work at Gardener's Supply, so there's an aspect of natural resources in there, if you think about it. But no, not currently, which is why I would love to be able to devote all my natural resources mindsets and thoughts to this.
And so, what do you think is the biggest natural resource challenge for the city right now?
Right now, I mean, I went away for college and I lived in Connecticut for 4 years. And coming back every year and seeing how much everything changed and how much development we've put in has been really interesting. And especially just this past year and a half since I've gotten back, it's been really interesting to see the development. But I do think, like Beth said, that poses a challenge, especially for Vermont, especially because we are a nature-based economy, I would say, and a natural resources-based economy for a lot of things like the lake in the summer and all of the foliage and the leaf peepers and the skiing and snowboarding. And I definitely think it is important going forward for us to find a balance of keeping those natural resources available for future use, for current use, while developing our town into a more community-centered, more tight-knit area. And I think that is currently our biggest challenge.
Does council have questions? Andrew?
Hi, Grace. Thank you for applying. I'll just ask you the same thing I asked Beth, which is, are there kind of particular policies, particular goals, proposals that, you'd like to see, you'd like to try and get done as part of the N.R.C.C.?
This one is more of a personal passion of mine, but I was hoping to do some research on the South Burlington area and work on some amphibian crossings, which is a very niche thing. Um, but in a lot of big cities like this, and even around my building, there are a lot of amphibians, frogs, salamanders that have to cross roads because they have to breed in the pond that they were born in, which is called the vernal pond. And I would just love to see some, I don't know, a volunteer effort or some type of way with the city where we could block off an area and let them cross. That's just a personal passion project of mine that I would love to see.
That's cool. That's actually really important. Thank you.
There's a spot on the Burlington bike path just past Hula where somebody fenced off a little spot of dirt and said that there's something that eggs that were buried there, please don't disturb them and let them cross to go back to the lake. And I ran there every weekend and never saw what the critters were, but I always, respected the fact that was roped off. So
That's very nice of someone.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, Grace, I may be stealing someone else's question, but can you give just some examples of teams that you've worked on?
Yeah, so in high school, I was president of our DECA club. I don't know if anybody follows that. It was a very successful club. And then in college, I was the president of a campus-wide club called Take Back the Tap, which worked with the National Food and Water Watch. And we worked on reducing and eventually banning plastics on campus, plastic bottles and vending machines, stuff like that. We reviewed contracts. So I had to work with my immediate team there, as well as working with officials from the campus and some of the people who worked with our Coca-Cola contract. I also have worked in customer service for a long time, which I know might be overlooked, but it is a big, big teamwork aspect. Especially, I was a waitress for a long time. Big teamwork aspect with my coworkers and with customers. And now I work at Gardener's Supply, and it's a lot more personal, but we still work with a really big team. So I would say I have a decent amount of experience with working with a team. I would say I'm very friendly, I'm energetic, and I'm not afraid to speak up for myself or for somebody else who needs it.
Great, thank you.
Mike, got a question?
Yes, I think you heard the question. I've asked it consistently in terms of, how do we be sure that everyone in the community benefits from the efforts and thoughts and expertise that flow out of the Natural Resource Committee? What would be some thoughts or examples of how to do that?
Yeah, so I personally have had a lot of different experiences in South Burlington. I lived in a pretty affluent area when I was younger, and then I switched to an apartment, and now I actually live in a building that has low income subsidized housing, and I've also lived in the downtown areas. So I've been able to interact with a lot of different facets of our community and a lot of different, I guess, micro communities within our community. And I think that the most important thing is just making people feel like they're included in our decision-making process, in our thought process, because that's the most important way to get people interested. Because if they think, well, it doesn't even matter, I'm this, and the people on the committee are this. But I think that it's just really important to make people feel included and wanted, especially when it is big decisions affecting their community and their personal life. I just think that a discussion or just a round table or something they're really important for decision-making processes.
Thank you.
I agree, Grace. I think outreach is really important for, residents when they participate in certain committees, right? To take every opportunity they can when they meet people that they don't know very well, to kind of relate those experiences and how important they are for the city. So appreciate that. Do you have any questions for us about process? And then I'll ask Lori if he has any questions.
I think Beth actually asked the question that I had.
Okay.
And it was answered to my satisfaction.
Okay. Now, Lori is online, but I can't see him. Do you have any questions, Lori?
I'm right here, Grace. Yeah, just a quick question, and thank you for applying. And I'm thrilled to have a younger member of our community applying to be engaged in the civic process. And as a younger person, I'm wondering what your biggest concerns are facing our community and our natural resources, and what your biggest hopes are.
Yeah, I personally, I'm like Beth was, I'm also concerned about the what's the word I'm looking for? No, I mean, not destruction, but I guess the development that has been happening affecting our natural resources. I know the area I live in is developing really, really quickly. I'm not sure what neighborhood it is. It's near the airport by Kennedy Road, but that area is developing very, very quickly. And I know just the other day they cut down a whole bunch of trees, and I was so upset about it. And I said, if they go for my favorite tree, I will go out there. But I didn't. They didn't cut it, so it's okay. But that personally is a big concern of mine, just because I grew up here and I really appreciate the natural resources that we have. And I'm hoping that we can find a balance between the development that we need and the natural resources that we also need. And then in the more broad scale of things, I do think climate resilience is really important, especially, we're not as affected by a tornado. We don't get them super often, a tsunami, anything like that. But I think that we need to have our own customized protections in place, because our area will be more affected by extreme weather in terms of heat and snow and rain. And I think that for a lot of people, it's hard to be able to prepare for that. So I think that the city helping people would be really good, especially for those more urban areas in this freezing weather, in that over 100-degree heat. My concern is just making sure that we have infrastructure in place because, I mean, it's not up to us to solve the climate crisis. It's not going to go away. So I think having those infrastructures in place for the future is really important.
Great, thank you.
So Grace, thank you so much for applying. As you
Thank
heard,
you.
we're probably going to, we're going to have an executive session later and do some voting in public to make the appointments. And so we'll be in touch one way or the other.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nice to meet you all.
Same here. All right, so we only have those 2 interviews, and we're going to move on to item 8, which is discussion and possible action. Receive legal guidance from bond counsel. Are we ready? Okay. Related to the closing of the financing for the Dorset Street water tank bond, take action to accept and approve the associated resolution and certificate and designate Jesse Baker, City Manager, Martha Machard, Director of Finance and City Treasurer, and Colin McNeil, City Attorney, as being authorized to act for the city in matters related to the Vermont Bond Bank financing, and authorize the City Manager to complete and execute the authorized representative's document. With Robert Fletcher, SPNF Attorneys, PC. Good evening, sir.
So this is Bob Fletcher,
Yeah.
if folks don't know Bob, and also Tom DePietro, Public Works Director, is online, as well as if you have questions about the project, and Jared Pellerin, our Deputy City Attorney, is here as well.
It's a heck of an introduction, Mr. Chair.
Well, it's our job.
I don't know what's
Are
left
you-
for me to say, but
Are you bright green on your mic?
On your microphone, can you just touch the button, make sure it's bright green?
there you go. How's that?
Okay, and make sure you're not too far from the microphone. You can pull it up towards you if you want.
The good old days, you used to just shout
That's right.
when I started this business. Yeah, so I provided to you a set of draft documents or quasi-execution ready documents for you to review, as well as a memorandum explaining the project. I think you're probably familiar with it anyway. In terms of having to take action tonight, I've brought with me an execution-ready set of documents flagged for sign here, so that the wrong things don't get signed and the right things do get signed. There are only 2 documents in here that require the signature of the council members, and then all of the rest are either the clerk or treasurer's signature. Your part of the work is pretty easy. The project, as you know, is to finance a new water tower on Dorset Street. It is a general obligation note. If anybody's curious about that, we won't know what the city will be paying for interest or debt service until the bond bank bond is priced next week. So your price is dependent on what the bond bank is able to sell its bond for, because they're using the proceeds of their bond to buy yours, if that makes any sense. It's effectively a loan from the bond bank, an obligation to repay, semi-annual interest payments, annual principal payment, according to the terms. A couple of interesting things that you ought to know. One is that there is a provision for a state intercept. So if you don't make debt service payments as scheduled, but you are entitled to money from the state, the bond bank won't bother to call you. They'll go get it from the state directly.
Nice to know.
So keep track of the payments and make them when they're due, or give up your grant money or whatever else you're expecting. You are certifying, in essence, many of the same things that you would be certifying were you obtaining a business loan for a business, so that you don't know of any litigation that's pending or threatened to challenging you as the city council, or challenging the ability to issue the bonds or the project itself. You promise to make your timely payments, that all of the information that's been provided to the bond bank by the city is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief, that you will pursue the project with reasonable diligence. There's an obligation to have 85% of the bond proceeds expended within 3 years of the issue date. So it's not something that you borrow and sit on.
Great.
Any questions?
Well, I have a question for Tom, and it's like not bond related, but it's a water tank issue, and I just thought of it. And so I apologize for thinking of a question at the last minute. And Tom, is there any complication with adding the second tank to FAA regulations and the light on top of the communications tower that's next to it? Or I'm just curious if anything special has to be done because of it, or because the old tank, they're the same exact height, it's not a problem.
Hi, everybody. Tom DePietro, Public Works Director. I'm assuming you can all hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah. No, Tim, that was something we looked at early on with the radio tower and the radio equipment. I believe that was part of discussion with Act 250 as well. So there's no issue there.
No issue. Okay. So you need us to make a motion and vote on that, and then we have to sign the documents later, right? And yeah, do we have a motion?
Yeah. So I move to accept.
Wait,
Hold on. I'm sorry. What?
Mike?
Yeah. I guess what?
Is your light on?
I'm sorry. One question.
Yes.
As you mentioned, the interest rate will get locked in once. What is the current range? I mean, what are we talking about here?
I haven't been part of the bond bank's pricing or underwriting processes. In the old days, they used to. We were more intimately engaged in that process. Now, because the bond bank just buys the bond, they take care of it themselves, and I haven't seen any pricing information from them.
Okay. And Tom, I guess my question is, as you said, this money is to be borrowed and to be spent, not to just be accumulated. What is the time frame on? Just if you can refresh my memory, the time frame on the construction of the second tower, water tower.
We are moving forward quickly. So council approved award of the bid at their February 3rd meeting. I signed some contract documents end of last week. Then there's a pre-construction meeting coming up. We'll learn quite a bit more about schedule. But our expectation is that you'll see construction this summer and into the fall. So it'll be no issue. I think Mr. Fletcher mentioned that 85% of it had to be expended in 3 years. That won't be an issue at all as far as the rate at which things are moving forward right now.
Okay. That means in 3 years this should be done. How? I mean, it sounds like a big project. You'll start this summer. Is it 1, 2, 3 year effort or?
Yeah, I don't remember the date we had in the contract offhand, but it could extend into next year. My hope is that a good chunk of the work will be done this year into the fall, and then we'll reach substantial completion. But like I said, if council would like an update on the schedule after we have our pre-construction meeting, I can give you much better information. We just haven't had that meeting yet to meet with the contractor.
Okay, that would be nice. Thank you very much, Tom.
Did Lori have any questions?
No, I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay, so we're ready for the motion.
So I move to accept and approve the resolution and certificate with respect to the Dorset Street water tank bond.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Does the council have any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Lori said aye. Did you say aye?
Yep.
Okay, so
I did.
It is unanimous.
And there's a second motion. So I move to designate Jesse Baker, City Manager, Martha Machar, Director of Finance and City Treasurer, and Colin McNeil, City Attorney, as being authorized to act for the city in matters related to the VBB financing, and authorize the City Manager to complete and execute the authorized representative's document.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Lori, you said aye?
Yes.
Okay, so it is unanimous. It's hard to hear you because your audio gets chopped off a little bit, so. Okay, so that's that. And do you want us to sign those now, or you want to wait till you have it in the meeting? Or?
Bob, are you anticipating taking them with you? Is that your preference?
I don't need to, Jesse. I can pick them up. We don't need them until a week Thursday.
Do we sign it?
Okay.
No.
If you don't mind just leaving with me, and
No,
we'll do
that's
it
fine.
later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you all.
We'll move on to item 9, which is receive an orientation and briefing on the city's new incredibly fantastic website by Andy Brumbaugh, Communications and Outreach Manager. Good evening, Andy. Are you carrying the website with you in your hand?
Yes, it's all hosted right here on this laptop. Hello, everybody. Just give me a moment to share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Sure. Everybody in the audience online, I urge you to go to the city website and check it out as soon as possible. We should have the city councilors submit our city pictures that would rotate, and give credit, week by week, the Mike Scanlon photograph from Red Rocks, Yeah.
It's a great idea. We can have a contest. All right. So, as you said, I'm Andy Brumbaugh, the Communications and Outreach Manager. So I headed up this new website, although I certainly didn't do it alone. After evaluating the different options that we had, we ultimately chose the company C.B.A. for our new website. I think, Mike, I believe you mentioned Shelburne's new website and how much you like that. And as we were just about to make that decision, we were happy to see that it was the same company as Shelburne's website. We're in pretty good company with a bunch of our neighbors. Burlington also launched a brand new website from C.B.A. as we were building ours. So we're in good company there. We have oriented the new website around kind of a different set of priorities. So we wanted to have a nice, new, attractive website. So we have these nice, beautiful pictures of South Burlington and the natural beauty kind of front and center. The top navigation is now built around the information other than departments. So we don't want someone to have to know what department is responsible for a particular project in order to be able to find the information that they want. To some degree, they will need to know some things, but any major initiatives or projects or common things they need to do will be under these new structure and new navigation. We also have some graphic buttons along the bottom. So we looked at our Google Analytics and we determined what the most common things that visitors were clicking on, and we made those into buttons so people have easy access to those things. And we launched with one set. We've already changed them once with our new permitting software. So as things evolve and as people need new things or visit different things more frequently, we will be able to update that ourselves. We also, in the process of migrating the website, we went through and kind of touched up and updated every single page on the website, deleted things that were out of date, combined things, reworked the organization to make sure that things that were things were together, and just generally improve the whole website as part of this process. We also added these department pages as part of the design. So the main website has a particular design, and then all these department pages follow that design, but with their own kind of unique spin. So each department is able to highlight with photos their department or what they're responsible for, and then the buttons and the menus are all custom to those departments as well. So if you have a complicated or elaborate department with a lot of things to it, you can surface those things that people are looking for a lot more easily. We're also able to feature some of our initiatives like City Center or Climate Action, and give those a face and a home that people can go to directly, give them a little more visibility. All the website, kind of the hero item is these mega menus. So these are these huge menus that pop down, and the goal of these menus is to show everything, make it very scannable so people can find things in 1 to 2 clicks. We also have a search box that's pretty functional. It will automatically search live within FAQs. And if you click the button to perform the search, it'll bring up all the relevant pages on the website. And I've done a couple tests. It's pretty thorough. Been able to find everything I'm looking for.
The overall goal of the site is to make it like a 24/7 place where people can go and find the information they need, not necessarily have to come to City Hall or visit the clerk's office or planning and zoning. Obviously, those people are there if you need them, but if people can do self-service at home when they have time or on the weekends, then that's even better. We also made a couple changes for accessibility. So the new website is a lot more mobile friendly than the old one. Depending on the day, up to half of our visitors are on mobile, so it's really important that website looks good on a mobile device and that it's the same experience that they have on desktop and mobile. The agenda for this meeting tonight and a bunch of other features are now more viewable on a mobile device. Before they were PDFs that were very, very tiny, not particularly functional. And there's also a bunch of accessibility options. We have the whole website is built with these. See if I can remember what this stands for here. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So that the website is kind of able to be manipulated and to be read by screen readers. We also have this audio eye feature, this little picture that you're seeing here, this purple one, that can enable people to disable animations or to increase the contrast for people who have low vision or any other potential disabilities. They'll be able to use the website a lot more easily. Along with those lines, we have Google Translate embedded on the site, and because the site complies with all those guidelines, that means everything is native text with different tags and headers, so we can translate the entire site into any language that Google Translate offers. So that makes it a lot more usable to more of our residents. Then we also have a bunch of nice features that we didn't have before. For notifications, we have this notification center, so any visitor to the website can set up their own account. They can check off any number of subscriptions that they would like to have. And what that means is that anything we post can be sent out as a notification, and so anytime a city council meeting is scheduled, they'd receive a notification. Anytime a news item is posted, they receive a notification. Anytime the agendas or the minutes are posted, they would receive a notification, so people don't have to keep coming back to the website. They can just check off the things they're interested in and know that they'll be kept up to date through this notification center. As part of this, we also now have a feed from the news section that pushes out to people's email. It also goes to an RSS feed that is monitored, and that gets picked up by another service that we're using now that posts anything that goes to the city's news feed to social media. So now we maintain 5 different social media accounts, and those all get the exact same thing. So if people prefer Facebook, or they prefer X, or they prefer Blue Sky, they'll all get the same feed of information and be notified whenever we post something. In the future, we're hoping to move our newsletter platform through this website, and so that means those news articles can be automatically fed into the newsletter, and we won't be duplicating the work of rebuilding them on a totally separate platform just for city news. There's also a couple nice staff tools that come along with this. We have the Agenda Center and the bid modules. Those are kind of back-end things that are kind of purpose-built. So now we can build the agendas natively within the website. That makes them able to be hosted on the website in native HTML. So people at home and in this room can access them. They can read them on their phone. They can format them for printing. They can download the agenda or the entire packet. The bid module is able to be used by anybody who places bids. So Public Works now has, instead of pasting a bunch of text on a website, they have the individual bids they can put in with opening dates, closing dates. Those can also be subscribed to, so anyone who's interested in doing business with the city could subscribe to these bid modules, and every time a bid is posted, they'll get that notification. And then, at the same time, we launched the online permitting system, which I wasn't responsible for building, but have integrated into the website. So as you know, Steve headed up that effort, but that kind of dovetailed nicely the 2 launch dates. So now there's a lot more that residents can get done on their own without having to come into City Hall. There's another update to that coming with planning and zoning forms and public works permits. But right now we've revamped all the sites that had links to either PDFs or online forms, and now they all jump over to this service for people to do things. And finally, this whole website only launched a month ago. The launch is surprisingly smooth. We've only gotten a handful of comments where people had a hard time finding something. We made a few changes to the website to add those things to menus to make sure that they're easily seen and found by people who need them. But we're more than happy to take any feedback from the council or from residents and make any changes that are within our power to make it more usable for everybody.
So I just want to say it was surprisingly smooth because Andy put an enormous amount of work into testing and quality controlling it before it launched. So huge kudos to Andy for his work and all the leadership team who really spent a lot of time reviewing all the online content and getting it up to date. So huge leap forward, I think, in our communications.
But the burning question we all have is, where's the AI in it? How much AI is there?
There is an add-on for AI.
Oh, there is.
We just have to spend the money.
Okay, I was just kidding, but now I'm fascinated. Did the hosting change at all?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
Civic Plus, they must contract out to somebody, and so are all those towns that were on that list all hosted on the same servers?
They're all hosted by Civic Plus. I don't know physically, where they all are, but they all hosted by Civic Plus.
Okay, and so what types of changes can staff make besides doing the agenda center? Or, I mean, can they change content of pages and add links, or they can do it themselves?
They can, yeah. That was one of the reasons we chose this platform. It was a really nice mix of an attractive website that it was also easy for staff to update without having to get a designer or a coder involved. So staff has different levels of access, but most of the department heads are able to go in and edit their own pages. They can change any text they want. They have access to upload images or to add things to the calendar. Some of the more intrepid people who have used the website have kind of gotten creative with the design. They can drag and drop widgets around. There's all kinds of different modules that are really easy just to pop in and customize without really needing to know a lot about the website. So we have some people who have inspired the rest of us to make some interesting changes to some of the sites.
So is there a staging area just for that, and then when they're done with that, is there a review process before it gets pushed out to the production page?
There can be. Anybody who uses it can make changes. They can preview it. They can add information to the back end that gets automatically pulled to the front end, or if they make changes to the front end, they can publish it, save it as a draft, and then depending on the level of access an employee has, they can also be what's known as an author, so they can make something but they can't publish it, so that has to be reviewed by a department head or an administrator before it goes live to the site.
And everybody has their own user ID and password.
Mm-hmm.
How often do the passwords have to be changed?
Nobody's told me that.
What?
As far as I know, nobody's told me. So as far as I know, no requirement to change the password.
There's no requirement to change the password that you know of.
Nope.
Is that a Civic Plus? Anyway, I don't want to get
in the weeds.
I know, but these are the things I worry about, right? When you have something new, like the worst
Pretty
case.
sure our IT director is all over.
Okay,
this.
okay, good. And what was the other question? Is it pretty easy to add other types of form documents that might come along besides the permit set that you had so far to be able to then put them through a workflow process to be added? So.
Yeah, the website has its own built-in, pretty robust form feature, and then anything else that we add from a third party, the website supports custom code, and we can embed things, and there should be no problem to integrate anything.
And there are no shared user IDs. Everybody gets a unique. Okay, good. I'm telling you, these are the things that
In fact, we have,
at my job. So I just want to make sure that they're propagated. Okay.
We have
questions from council besides me?
Hey, I think this looks great.
Thank you.
Huge improvement. Really well done. Bravo. Question about legacy links, like when you go on Google or Bing, and maybe it's just like this transition, but like I'll go on in South Burlington climate change resolution, and Google pops up a link, and you click on it and not found, right? So is there an easy way to map where the documents used to be to where they are, or is it just a matter of Google crawling it enough times to, over time that worked itself out?
It's a little bit of both. I manually triggered a new crawl from Google when we launched, but it can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months for that to kind of cycle through. We can easily create redirects, so any link can be redirected to any other link. It's just not necessarily doable on a large scale. I would have to basically have a list and manually enter each one. So if there are things that we access a lot, or if there's any literature out there that has links or QR codes that you want to make sure still work, I can always take care of that. But I can't make every link that comes up in Google. I can't make that map to the new site.
So barring that, which sounds like a lot of effort and work that probably is not worth it, how long do you think it will be before, typing something into Google pops up generally the right document most of the time?
I'm not 100% sure, but I anticipate probably within the next month or so.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I had a quick question, or a question from a resident, which is not related to this work or peripherally related, but can residents still register pets in City Hall still, or do they have to create an account online?
You have to create an account online.
Yeah, I guess I would suggest.
Well, I would say this: if people do not have internet access or cannot do it, then we would either help them do it or process them for them. That is a very, very small portion of our population.
Yeah, it just came up as a question. And for you, Andy, is there an opportunity to leverage sort of a regional agreement with Civic Plus with all the towns you listed that use that?
I don't know. I would have to talk to Jesse about that and see if that's in the cards. But we certainly do have a kind of a mass of towns in this area.
Yeah, my impression is that we do have some economies of scale because it's an off-the-shelf product. We're not paying coders to write a website. Having said that, we don't necessarily want to intermingle our content because, the ordinances are different, the forms of government are different, all of those things. So from their end, there may not be a real regional advantage other than just giving us a discount.
Mike?
I've been on the other side. I always feel like they're forgetting you. Why don't we go to Lori and then I'll go after Lori.
Oh, Lori, you have questions? Where's Lori? Did Lori leave?
He's still on.
Still on, but he's muted. We can't hear you if you're there, Lori.
There, I couldn't unmute. Sorry. I don't have any questions. I just want to say great job and what an effort.
Thank you very much.
Can you get the website down there, Lori? Does it come up?
It pops right up on my phone and it's like I'm in America still.
Wow. You sort of
Which
are,
I am.
I think. Yeah.
Which I am.
And Mike?
Yes, just kudos. I think from in making it accessible information and having people access all the great services that we have, making it easier to do business, accelerating processes, freeing up staff time to do other things. It's really, really, I think, just transformational, and applause to you and everyone else who participated in this. And I also just want to urge people that if they find a glitch or have a problem, not to be shy to reach out to you. I know early on when this came on board, I was trying to do some research and it turns out I couldn't access things. And in speaking to you and the IT staff, it turns out, to your point about AI, that AI machines are going in there and trying to copy all this information, and I couldn't access it. But you guys found a solution and took over control, and that's no longer a problem. So again, if you have a problem using this great thing, don't be shy in reaching out to the staff. They will fix the problem, as was my experience at the very beginning. So kudos on that again.
Thank you. Actually, that relates to the agendas. We have a lot of documents hosted on a service called Laserfish, and all the agendas have been hosted there. and we're moving those to this agenda center now. So if you've ever tried to access city council meeting agenda and gotten an error or saying that there aren't enough licenses available, that should be a thing of the past now.
Are you adding in links to all the YouTube videos of the meetings as well?
We link out to Town Meeting TV.
To Town Meeting, okay, all right.
Yep, and each now that as we're building all the meetings in the agenda center, once the video is posted and we have a link for that, we can add it to the agenda so you can access it directly.
And if you had to identify the biggest benefit of this new website system with Civic Plus, does one thing come to your mind?
I think just the general usability for staff. There was a lot of frustration with the last website of things that we just couldn't do, or we couldn't make things attractive, or there wasn't a good way to present information. And this new website gives us a lot more tools. So I think a lot of people are really a lot happier with the way they're able to present all the hard work that they do so people can actually see it and understand it.
That's great. That's great. The previous website took a long time to be generated over its previous website, and this one is like a light year jump ahead. So I really appreciate it. Any other questions, Council? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will be looking and using the website continuously.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, we're going to move on to item 10, which is discussion and possible action. Consider approving Resolution 2025-5, City Council Resolution in recognition of Richard Underwood and family and the dedication of the Overlook at Underwood Park. And Adam is here, Adam Math from Recreation and Parks. He's the director. Good evening.
So can I do just a teeny bit of table setting? I believe
Yes.
we have some of the Underwood family here as well. So just as a reminder to the council, you have talked about this 3 times in the last year or so, and that has been a combination of the discussion about this particular park and a conversation about how in the future we name public assets. So we, at your direction, have brought you a resolution for consideration tonight, but it is your decision how we move forward. And Adam was the author of this resolution and can walk you through it.
Awesome. So that background there, I put together the resolution. There is one minor thing that Patricia had mentioned to me in it, so I'm not sure the process in this, but the first line I put in 60 acre and it should be 260 acre. So I can change that out. But this resolution just kind of goes over the background on the what is now Hubbard Park, as well as the Overlook Park background with the Underwood family, which we had gone through during the April council meeting, which I was here to kind of walk through all of these. But the Underwood family purchased that location in 1921. Richard was a city employee where he was the city assessor for 29 years throughout the city. And then it kind of goes through with this resolution. Any questions I can help answer? I know we've talked about this a couple times.
No, I like the history that is developed through the whereases and then the final, therefore. It looks good. This brings up an interesting question about naming policies, and Elizabeth has given the council some examples of how other communities do it. And we, in terms of Detilio Drive, right, the school went through a process to generate names in the city and brought them to the planning commission, right? But that's a given. There's a process for that for streets, right? And I don't think there is one developed for parks at this time, right?
Nope.
No.
So I think, some councilors were surprised back in, was it 2021 when, some names were changed and there wasn't input, given or solicited at that point, right? So, I mean, my personal desire is that when there's a significant park change, I think the city council needs to be involved. I mean, disagree with me if you'd like, but I think we need to have some sort of a policy that states that if there's a major parcel that's going to be named, that it has to go through city council and has to be debated by council. But we don't have language for that right now, do we?
So you don't have a naming policy about how you select a name, but it's absolutely within your statutory authority to be the ones to name.
Right, and if
There's
that's
no other process for that to happen.
right, so if that's adequate and everybody's comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with it as well. I just wanted to reaffirm that would be our responsibility. So we have before us this resolution, and I'm just want to get the I support it, and I want to get the feelings from other counselors.
See, I support it too. I think the principal reason for me is that the family has come before us and represented to us that they believe there was an understanding with respect to the 60-acre parcel to name it after the Underwood family, but they're happy, I gather, with this resolution given the history now of that parcel, and I think it's important, therefore, that we do this in recognition of what we heard from the family.
Thank you, Andrew. Mike, do you have a comment?
Sure. I guess I would take it once. I would say that it, as I understand the issue, and from the family's perspective, Hubbard Park was actually going to be was to be named Underwood. So I think it was unfortunate that we sort of have backed ourselves into this position. I do agree that this concept of having some sort of standard policy on how we name parks is an important thing to avoid things, and no disrespect to Mr. Hubbard, who also should be recognized by service, but I guess just to be consistent, it would be good to have a policy in many ways. With I don't know what the discussion was with the Underwood family, with a hyphen name for the original, or is the goal to have something separate, standalone, an Overlook? I mean, one of the nice things about the Overlook Park is sort of a name unto itself. I think the solution here is a creative one, the Overlook at Underwood Park. So it keeps the Overlook in there, which I think is what everyone is most familiar with. I wish we could basically have at the same time come up with a standard policy for naming parks. So in so doing, we would name however that would be, whether it's a hyphenated name for Hubbard and Underwood, or this version for the Overlook would basically at the same time set a policy going forward. I don't know if that is just too complicated. I think it's definitely high time to give the Underwood family the recognition and acknowledgement for which, I guess, as I understand it, was part of the understanding of their generous offer to sell the property at a point. But I guess that's a question for the city, is getting a policy is just a very protracted thing, and we would just put off something that should have been done a long time ago. Are we talking, how long a process is that to try to get to a policy? Is that complicated? So we can basically sort of like address two issues at once.
So I'm not sure it would be a hugely long, protracted effort to develop a policy, but there are, multitude other priorities that this has not risen to the top of as we've reprioritized other requests by the council. So I think what you said to us back when you said put it on an agenda in November was, don't wait for that, move forward with this. And when we get to the naming policy, we will get to the naming policy.
Is the naming policy on the bike rack? I mean, we don't have anything else in the immediate horizon that has a naming issue involved in it?
Well, we do to an extent. I mean, at some point, the city should consider naming the bike ped bridge.
Yes.
But that's not, we're not under construction on that yet. That's not as imminent as...
It's going to be a while.
But it's something that we could have a naming policy. I mean, because I think it's important to avoid, I think, unfortunately, what happened perhaps this last time that got us into this awkward situation and unfortunate situation from the Underwood's family's perspective, which I fully understand. So I guess if we can, pursue this way, I do like the combination of keeping Overlook there at the Underwood Park. Then people are free to name it when they refer to where they're going as they wish. But yet the sign will give the proper recognition. And as I understand correctly, this was their land also at some point in time. So it is a direct connection. Okay. But I would like to do that with the sort of caveat that going forward, before we approach naming something else, we do develop a policy just to have a clear way of going forward consistently.
So just a reminder, we put the naming policy on the FY26 bike rack.
Okay.
So it's on the bike rack.
Bike rack to be done, not bike rack to be moved down.
Lori, any comments?
Yeah, I am also in support of this. I heard Andrew say that the family is happy with the solution. I had not heard that. If that is the fact, then I am totally comfortable with this.
I saw nods.
Who nodded? The family? Oh, okay, great. Then I am totally in favor of this. And we will revisit the issue of the naming policy when we do our strategy and planning.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Elizabeth?
Well, I brought this up a year ago in terms of having a naming policy. That did not make the priority list for FY25 policies. I am very supportive of honoring the Underwood family by naming something. I guess I have a couple of questions. One is, was a Hubbard hybrid name considered? Based on some of the history I'd read previously, there was a family history with Underwood Knoll, and I wondered if there was any consideration given to a hybrid name with Hubbard at Underwood Knoll or something to that effect. So from my standpoint, the way this progressed through a process was not as clear as what's in front of me. This is the first time in the resolution I saw some affiliation to the family and Overlook Park, as the first home was built alongside Overlook Park. And it was part of the property, but the bigger part was what is currently known as Hubbard. So one question is, what else was considered? But I would like to hear from the family, Tim, if you're comfortable with that, before we make a motion or take a vote on this. And in some of the information I sent you, part of the naming policy that would be considered is geographical specificity that highlights an area. So Red Rocks has a name for that reason, and Overlook has a name for that reason. So I also don't want to diminish the recognition of the family in the combination, but I accept that that's the recommendation in front of council right now. So if I could get an answer to that question, what was considered relative to Hubbard, and then maybe hear from the family, if you're comfortable, if council's comfortable.
Sure, that's
with that.
fine.
Sure. So as far as what was considered, it kind of goes back to, it would have been December of 2023 when Patricia met with Jesse and I, and through that conversation, Overlook is what was brought up, and then that's where the conversation has progressed. So since I've been here, there hasn't been any conversation as far as adjusting or adding to Hubbard Park itself.
Did the family want to come down and talk at all, or are you satisfied with us with the resolution that we have right now? And why don't you need to come down? I'm sorry, because we want to be able to get it on recording. And can you turn on her?
When I'm not my emails, and you are, right?
And just please, for the record, identify yourself.
Patricia Underwood Weaver. So at this point, I think we are happy to get what we can. We're worried that if we postpone it any longer, that we might lose what we have. And Overlook was where my grandfather's barn was, so that was a very big part of the farm, and then we had a home next to that. I do know in some discussions at Hubbard Park, I mean, one thing, we didn't feel that you were going to take the name away from Tom Hubbard, that wasn't probably going to be likely. Whether in the future there is a, because there is a beautiful knoll there, and that's what the land was known as. At Hubbard Park, if you ever had a section of Hubbard Park that was named Underwood Knoll, we certainly would, be happy with that as well. Mm-hmm. But I think at this point, we would be happy with the Overlook at Underwood Park.
Great. Thank you. And Adam, there'd be a sign change involved, right? And we would have to wait till warm weather for that?
Yeah, so I was talking to Travis about this, who does our kind of signage. He was estimating usually signs are about 6 weeks to 2 months, but then it would be something where we would probably look to wait for warmer weather.
Is that a brand new sign, or is it it's a brand new sign?
Yeah.
Okay, you just can't fit the font on there.
So. No, and then it would also get it up to like standards on what our other signs are looking like as well.
All right. Well, while Patricia's here, do we want to have a motion to accept this resolution?
So, yeah, I move to approve City Council resolution in recognition of Richard Underwood and family and the dedication of the Overlook at Underwood Park.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And Lori said aye,
Yes.
and it was unanimous. So thank you very much for coming tonight. We won't keep you any longer.
Okay, thank you to the council for considering this. We
You're
appreciate
absolutely welcome.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Adam. All right. So now we are going to try and change the agenda a little bit. We wanted to bring number 19 up, right? And that was, that was for N.R.C.C. executive session, right? And also number 12, right? Which was the Bourne. So is council, go ahead.
So I would recommend you go to number 12.
Okay.
So just table 11 for now, go to 12. Colin can do an introduction to that. Colin. And then go into executive session for both purposes.
Yep. And the question for Mr. McNeil is, who won that basketball game?
The JV team lost.
Oh, darn it.
The press gave us some headaches. My boys played well.
That's good. I'm sure they did. They learned from a good teacher.
Thank you, Colin McNeil, City Attorney. Presented before you is, I want to make sure that we're discussing that I'm here for the right topic. We are on the Bourne property.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. We have had, as you are familiar, there's been an ongoing litigation with the Bourne property, and that has been appealed to. It was originally denied by the DRB, and then appealed to the Environmental Court, and then it's been appealed to the Vermont Supreme Court. They also had an approval, an application that was approved by the DRB, but now we are back. We believe we have reached a settlement, and I think that I think we're teed up to probably have a quick conversation in an executive session to discuss the settlement.
That sounds good. Paul, do you have any comment right now? Okay, and we have a separate item, item 19, that we would want to go into executive session. So can we have the motions for 12 first, and then we'll have the motions for 19, right? And we have them right here.
The two circled ones.
And then we're going to go into executive session, and then we will come back.
I move that the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of the council's discussion of pending civil litigation to which the city is a party would clearly place this public body at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 I now move that
Waiting for Lori.
I said aye.
Okay, thank you. It's unanimous.
I now move that the City Council enter into executive session under 1 VSA Section 313A1 capital E for the purpose of discussing pending civil litigation to which the city is a party, specifically the Bourne property, inviting Jesse Baker, Steve Locke, Colin McNeil, and Paul Connor into session with council for the discussion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And so that's unanimous
Yes.
as well.
So one more. I move that the City Council enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the appointment of a public officer or employee, specifically appointments to the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee, inviting Jesse Baker, Steve Locke, and Colin McNeil into session with council for the discussion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Wait.
Jared is here. Can we add Jared to the invite
And
list?
Jared Peltier.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Lori? Aye. Was that an aye?
That was an aye.
Okay, and so it's unanimous again. So we're going to go in executive session and we'll be back.
And so do I understand that
Hold on.
I leave the
Lori?
question? Yes. Do I leave this Zoom and enter a new Zoom
Yes.
for executive session? Is that right, Steve? Okay.
Yes, the new Zoom's in your
Thanks.
inbox.
I got it. Thank you.
Question
Bye.
from the audience? Well, it's not a time for public comment right now. Is it a question?
It's about the board that being on the DRB.
Can you go to the mic and turn it on?
Certainly. John Muscatelli. As a member of the DRB and having spent numerous hours on this, not knowing there are only two real points that were up for litigation. So it's either the affordable housing or the drive-through ATM and a PUD. I would just encourage the council to remember that I would really be careful about any precedent that short circuits the planning board and the DRB process. So at this point, the legal issues in front seem pretty straightforward. And if they're bringing anything in that wasn't part of the original application, they should have to come through the application process again. I would be real hesitant to set a precedent where developers can just jump the queue, sue the city, and jump the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mike's up. Session, and we are at we're back still at item 11, which no, hold on, we're at
12.
Yeah, we're at 12. Right, we're at 12 now, which is consider approving and authorizing the city attorney and the city manager to execute the stipulated judgment order and any and all other documents necessary to effectuate the settlement on behalf of the city council to resolve a lawsuit on the Bourne property. We have Paul Connor from Planning and Zoning and Colin Neal, the city attorney, this evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I would suggest you make a motion that's in your memo, and then the staff can explain it.
Who has the motion?
All right.
We're getting the motion.
Got it right here.
It was emailed. I think.
It was emailed?
Yeah. Hold on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Electronic transport.
So I move to approve and authorize the city's attorney and city manager to execute the stipulated judgment order and any and all other documents necessary to effectuate the settlement on behalf of the city council in relation to the Bourne property matter.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
So, Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. Let me just give a brief summary for the public. So, as Attorney McNeil had spoken about prior to the executive session, there was an application that was originally submitted to replace the three properties, the former gas station, the former Bourne Auto, and the Pizza Hut, with three new buildings. Back in 2023, that was denied by the DRB. The city's development review board and appealed first to the environmental court and then to the Supreme Court. In their intervening time, the applicant submitted a new application to the development review board that changed two substantive parts of the project, removing an ATM and adjusting the number of permanently affordable homes to match the regulations in place at the time. That was approved by the DRB. Both projects involved a lot of work by the DRB. In this settlement agreement, or in this proposed settlement agreement, the site layout and components of that match exactly what the DRB approved back in 2024, including their conditions of approval for some minor site changes that were required. The things that differ from the DRB approval is that in this settlement agreement, the applicant would be required to have, of the 30 homes being built, 24 of them be market rate and 6 be permanently affordable. That's a different number, a slightly lower number than what was through the DRB process. That number matches the regulations in place now in the city. So the city council adopted new regulations citywide following recommendations from the Affordable Housing Committee and Planning Commission to modify the calculation of how affordable inclusionary homes work. So this matches that number, which would be 6 permanently affordable homes. The project is also subject to the updated electric vehicle ready standards adopted by the city. Because the project is still in state permitting, it is subject to all the current codes as well for that subject, and the buildings will be subject to the renewable heating ordinance adopted by the city 2 years ago. The other change is that there was no specific timeline for removal of the buildings previously. Under this proposed settlement agreement, all of the existing buildings, the 3, would need to be removed by May 1st. So that's part of the agreement of this year. The council in their discussion acknowledged that that this is a change to what the DRB had reviewed in some manners in looking at the totality of the interests of expediency, of looking at the new regulations that are currently in place, and the interest in the community of seeing the building come down. The council's discussion was that this was the was the best way forward, while acknowledging all of the tremendous work that went into this by the DRB and staff.
And just to follow up for next steps, if you are to approve this and authorize the city's attorney to execute it, it will be signed by our representative and the representatives of Bourne. That will be submitted to the environmental court, and hopefully at that point the environmental court will sign off, and this will become an order of the court and take the place of the DRB decision.
So because of the history of these parallel applications and their changes to our LDRs and this awful eyesore that has been a blight on this city for many years now, I support this, and I'm going to vote yes. It also will stop the litigation, and it will allow that corner to move forward with some new development. And I think that and since it meets our new regulations, I think this is a good idea. Are we ready for the vote?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Lori?
Aye.
And so Lori said aye, and it's unanimous. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you all.
Don't go too far, Paul.
So now, are we going to go back to?
So I think you're going back to 11.
To 11? Okay. So now we're going to 11, which is discussion and possible action to receive an introduction to a revised ordinance, Chapter 14, Environment, also known as the Nuisance Ordinance, and provide direction to staff. Jesse Baker, City Manager, Colin McNeil, City Attorney, and Paul Connor, Planning and Zoning Director.
So I'm going to start this and pass it off to staff. I did try and do a high-level summary memo for you that's linked at the top as the first item on your agenda related to this. I want to start by saying nuisance ordinances historically in municipal government are incredibly time-consuming and often create unintended consequences in communities. You had talked in your policies and strategies session about addressing the specific chipping standards, and then we were provided a draft nuisance ordinance by councilors for us to consider as we took up that action. So the work that Paul and Colin and Jared and Steve have put a huge amount of work into researching. The goal of the documents in front of you are really to, one, develop a starting point for a council discussion if this is work you're going to prioritize in the next few months, and two, to propose a logical and legally defensible proposal as a starting point. I think we've outlined some key questions for you if you are going to move this work forward. For example, is the decibel levels outlined the right duration? Are you comfortable having the Planning Commission prioritize this work over other works? Are there other people you'd like to hear from? And what level of enforcement do you expect? You obviously always have a do nothing option. Tell us that this is great work. It can sit on the shelf until we have completed some of our other priorities. You can move to a first reading. You can strengthen or weaken the draft. Or you can, in any of those cases, ask the Planning Commission to move forward with the performance standards and the LDRs. So that's kind of the buckets of things I want you to be thinking about as you hear about these documents. And I think Colin and Paul are going to walk us through the work they did to get to this point.
Thank you, Colin McNeil, City Attorney. Yeah, really at your direction, we took a look at our current excessive noise ordinance and our LDRs in regards to the performance standards to really see how they work together and to also look at both to see what is the best mechanism for dealing with perhaps some noise that isn't currently addressed and whether a quantifiable standard should be introduced into the nuisance ordinance. So in looking at this, in thinking about how these play together, the performance standards of the LDRs and the nuisance ordinance play together, we first kind of analyzed what's the purpose of the LDRs, and what's the purpose of the performance standards. They are to regulate and set standards for uses and development that have been run through or proceeded through the LDR process, to the Development Review Board or through the administrative officer and received approval. What kind of standards do we want to see applied to those uses that have been reviewed and approved? The nuisance ordinance, on the other hand, deals more with one-off incidents and actions and sounds and that weren't approved or didn't go through the LDR process. So, for instance, a loud party at night or a revving of a car engine or tool sounds at times where the nuisance ordinance has deemed them inappropriate. So with that premise in mind, we took a look at both the performance standards and the nuisance ordinance and did see that in the performance standards, there were requirements in there that really belonged in the nuisance ordinance, that really weren't applicable to development or uses that were reviewed under the LDRs, that really should be more one-off incidents that should be addressed under the LDRs. So under the nuisance ordinance. So in doing that, we, in the draft before you, the first thing we did was move those items that were in the performance standards, move them over to the nuisance ordinance. Because that's better, that's where we felt was better for them to be located. We also looked at, I think maybe the driving force for this conversation, which was the removal of ledge, and to see where that is currently addressed and how it is currently addressed, and saw that there isn't a specific regulation in the nuisance ordinance for the removal of ledge, and there isn't a specific regulation in the LDRs for the removal of ledge. We did note that through the Act 250 process, oftentimes in the building process and the permitting process through state regulation, that the removal of ledge is addressed through that process before an approval is granted or a permit is issued. In thinking on that process, it was kind of our collective brain thinking that there should be a system set up in the LDRs, or there should be a system set up into how best that is reviewed for any kind of development. And so we felt that the best place for that was likely the LDRs and not the nuisance ordinance. And so we've thought about how that would appear in the nuisance ordinance or in the LDRs, and Paul can speak to that a little bit, but essentially the process would be that it is a component of the approval process that if you know ledge is going to be there and have to be removed, there would be a process in the LDRs as to how that's applied for, what's proposed, and how that is ultimately approved, whatever system you are proposing. For the nuisance ordinance itself, we then looked at, is there, based on, again, in your request, whether it's appropriate to include a quantifiable standard in that regulation, or in that ordinance. And we did a considerable amount of research to kind of come up to speed on how that quantifiable standard could be implemented and what it would be. We looked at several studies, several other municipal ordinances, and came up with what's been presented for you essentially, we looked at a World Health Organization study, ANSI standards, other ordinances, any other publications that we could find, and experience we've had in other proceedings where noise has been an issue. And what we look to is whether there is a really a quantifiable standard that we could point to say, hey, here's a starting point for a conversation. And what we noticed was that in the World Health Organization, or WHO study, they outline the decibels that would be harmful to the human ear for a prolonged period of time, and they also included a provision that identified the decibel level over a period of time that is annoying to people. And in considering this, it's 55 decibels A-weighted over a 16-hour period of time. So the average over a period of time is that the decibels would be 55 decibels or over, causes high annoyance to people. So in considering whether this is a standard what standard should we include, that is where we rest our hat, if you will, is to identify a standard that is based on a study that I think most people identify as credible. And so lastly, in looking at that standard, we recognize that there needs to be some exceptions to that. For instance, there already are exceptions in the nuisance ordinance. A couple other exceptions that we added was construction noise, as long as the equipment is being used appropriately. For instance, like a dump truck is sometimes going to be over that sound. Many tools, hammers, are going to be over that sound. We also excluded in this draft is the ledge removal, the site preparation procedures that would be specifically approved under the LDRs. And lastly, we excluded from the specific standards uses or sounds that are derived from uses that have been approved under the LDR process. For instance, HVAC units, if they're specifically approved under there, a lot of times the HVAC unit will be louder than what is included in the specific standard. A couple things of note is that the WHO study identifies that hearing loss isn't impacted for a DBA that has an average of over 70 for 24 hours. And looking at research, it was trying to identify, okay, what certain sounds make equivalent DBAs. And so general conversation is generally 55 to 60 dBA. And we've listed several other incidents that are sources of noise that are in the memo that and what dBA they generate. In looking at whether I know that what we've highlighted is an average sound. It seemed like that was the sound that was supported by the WHO study in terms of what causes the annoyance or health issues is over a period of time, not necessarily instantaneous sounds. The instantaneous sounds are quite loud if they're going to have any health impact. So based on all that, we've come up with some modifications to the nuisance ordinance for your consideration. And I think we also outlined some potential changes to the LDRs that Paul can quickly outline.
So just speaking to the potential changes to the land development regulations, there's in our heads there's sort of two topics here. One is the disruption caused by the removal of bedrock of ledge during construction, and then separately with a little bit of a juncture point is all things nuisance. Regardless of where the council chooses to go with the nuisance component of it, staff would still advocate the LDR change to address how ledge removal takes place, in part because, well, for two major reasons. One, as Colin noted, this has been regulated for larger projects by Act 250 over the years, with changes that are temporary and changes that are longer term coming up in the next couple of years. Fewer projects will be subject to Act 250. So there's a subject area that we should take on in that area. Additionally, over the last couple of years, where there have been projects that have likely involved the removal of ledge, staff and the Development Review Board have used the tools that have existed to apply standards very similar to what you're seeing here. They've acknowledged that it's sort of through a planned unit development process that they have some authority to regulate, the overall functions and operations of a project, and they also acknowledge that it's not a great fit. But it has resulted in some very good process analysis, and that's where I think the LDRs differ from a nuisance ordinance, in that the LDRs can say an overall standard and expected outcomes, and then allows for an applicant to make a thorough, technical analysis of this, hire a firm, have the staff and the DRB hire an independent technical review if they will, if they choose to make sure that on a case by case basis, just like all the other things that they do, it's the best situation for that individual circumstance. Whereas the nuisance ordinance is really, this is the line. There is no change on it, and it can't count for, what a different project needs. And then the juncture point between these two is the nuisance ordinance serves as a backup. So in the instance that an applicant either represented that there was no removal of ledge, or they missed it, then it gives them both a line of which they can't exceed and an ability to go back to the DRB to get the proper approval at that time. So they sort of support one another. I think that's all I wanted to add to it.
Well, there's a lot to digest here.
Can I clarify something?
Sure, go ahead.
My understanding, and I may have to be reminded of a council vote on a review of the nuisance ordinance, but based on the FY25 policies, it was to consider regulatory or incentive change to limit chipping during construction, and it had that focus. We know that percussive sound disrupted a lot of homeowners over a long period of time and residents, and my understanding is that element was taking a priority now in this fiscal year. Can I be clarified of a vote that might have been taken to look at a broader ordinance?
Steve looks like.
I would say that I think we talked about that, but it was difficult for us to narrow in on what we felt was one single noise-making part of construction, as opposed to bringing forth to you what we believed was an all-encompassing policy that you could then change, policy parts of it, decibel levels, how it's measured. But we felt it was more appropriate to bring it to you as an entire package than a singular thing.
And I guess I would also just add to that, that's partially why we're coming to you now. We've done some work to try and recommend something that's logical, but we don't want to spend any more time on it if the majority of the council isn't at a place to do all the follow-up work we need to do to actually move this forward.
I mean, I personally like the idea of moving the ledge removal, and I thought you were saying lead removal for a long time. Now I know it's
sorry,
ledge.
ledge
Removal is really quiet, ledge is not. So, to the LDRs and having the planning commission look at that, I think that's a good idea, because that it makes it applicant specific, because every one of the situations is going to be a little bit different, I think. And I don't know if other councilors agree with me or not. The thing that it's not that I worry about, but I have to ask the question. It's like, what in residents' minds, what's broken right now and what's not broken? Obviously, ledge removal was a real issue when it occurred, right? And it irritated a lot of the neighbors in that area. But then in general, what else is there? There's barking dogs. There's leaf blowers, right? There are a few things that stick out in people's minds that are used often that that tend to, feel like they're disruptive. And so the question is, you're really into performance standards, right, with decibel levels, and sometimes I wonder, is it just nailing down those 10 things that people have the most complaints about, right? And then if, like, for example, if I go back far enough in time, there's a quiet time, and one of the specific regulations is, garbage removal's not allowed before 7 a.m. And I think I've said this before, I've run out the street and stopped garbage trucks in my neighborhood, both on Meadow Road and even on Royal Drive at 6 o'clock in the morning, and said, you can't come back. You got to get out of here and come back at 7. You have to come after 7. I don't want to hear the banging. I don't want to hear engine. I don't want to hear any of that. And it's in the regulations. And so that was very specific, and that was helpful to me to tell them. And even when I've had to call some of those haulers to say, don't ever let those trucks come back before 7, right? That's the kind of thing I'm interested in. And so I don't know. So it's like abstract numbers or practical things that people have real complaints about, and I don't know how many complaints, the dispatchers have received in the last year about particular types of things that have annoyed them. So that's a just general comment.
So I have some comments. So I think the objective decibel level standards in question is probably the most complicated one. And so I wanted to address that, but can I park that and put that at the end of my comments? Because I think it is a fairly long discussion. I'll just note that we already have decibel levels in the performance standards for nighttime commercial and residential noise. So we already have that, right? We just don't have the daytime standards like other towns do. But let me come back to that. In terms of the LDRs and the site preparation noise, I think that's a great idea. I think that's the right spot for it. Presumably, if that was part of the DRB process and a developer violated whatever the constraint was, our remedy would not just be fines, but would be able to pull the permit. Is that part of the idea?
So there are two options for enforcement of a condition from a development review board. One is daily fines. Another is to seek injunctive relief through enforcement through the environmental court. So there's two methods that can be sought.
So wouldn't it be like a permit violation where
that's the remedy to the permit violation.
You
can either go through Judicial Bureau for tickets, or you can go.
That is how you pull a permit, by going for injunctive relief. You mean?
Correct. So we can't ourselves pull it, but we can go to the courts and say
they're violating, because that's because
the
a fine itself is maybe not something that, depending upon the situation, it may just be a course of doing business, right? Whereas injunctive relief would be much more powerful, potentially.
I mean, the result might not be pulling the permit. They might still have the permit, but it might be to cease and desist whatever activity they are doing that's in violation of their permit.
Yeah, okay. So then my other comment on this is, I wouldn't want the process to be such that, for instance, there's a site, and notwithstanding, all the discussion and possibilities considered, the conclusion is, hey, you know what? The only way to build on this site is to chip for 3 months, and that's just what it is. That's the only way to do it, and therefore the permit or the DRB decision allows that. Like, in my mind, we need to set some constraints and conditions. There may be some sites that are just not amenable for building. If, for instance, if that were the case, just like, you can't build on a wetland, and if you buy a site that the only way to build it is to chip for 3 months, well, that's on you, right? You just can't disturb the community for that period of time. So I would love this council to give guidance to the Planning Commission that we would expect that whatever comes out would be some constraints on duration and sound and time that are reasonable and not unlimited. So,
well, but then that begs the question. I mean, again, it's like we're on the spectrum. Where's that criteria where you say, the permit says that you can only, use explosives, right? I mean, you can't chip, for example, right? And I don't know what that threshold is, right? You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
it's like, because I don't. because being able to use dynamite is also can be disruptive, right? But it's very singular, and it's a whole different ball of wax, and it's used extensively where it's needed. But chipping is like, it just goes on and on if it goes for too long. So I don't want to like have it bleed into and then sort of like lock out another method of being able to break up.
You know, I agree with that, Tim. I'm just saying that if there's going to be some really disruptive noise, that whatever comes out of the planning commission should be such that there are some constraints, limits, and conditions on that. It shouldn't be like, well, if that's the only way to build a site, then that's okay. That's what you got to do. Like that wouldn't be a good result in my mind if that was if that's what came out.
So I got a couple of comments to add to this.
So, Laura, I'm going to have a bunch of other comments. I mean, you're welcome to jump in here at this point, but I have another bunch of other things I want to say. But if you want to,
you go ahead.
Okay, okay. Again, I want to come back to the decibel standards for the exemption for construction noise, which I agree with. I think the hours are too broad, right? Because we're saying that basically, if it's construction noise, you just said dump trucks, drills, hammers, saws, you can like do whatever you want, and you can basically not be subject to the general provision of the noise ordinance, which says that it can't be unreasonable and can't disrupt peace, health, and safety. So I think those hours should be more limited. I would propose like 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., for the complete exemption. And then after those hours, people can still do construction, but have to live within the normal noise ordinance standard. I just think it's from 7 to 9 to give a complete exemption for all construction noise is just too broad. I think the same thing for the exemption for landscaping. I would say it should be the same 8 to 7. And again, outside those hours, you can still landscape with quieter equipment or hand or whatever. But like, I don't think you should have a complete exemption for, pushing your gas, blower or your gas mower at 8:30 p.m. Under this ordinance. The section that talks about the city manager discretion, I think it's too broad. I don't think and this is not about Jesse. This is in the abstract. A city manager shouldn't have discretion to waive any part of an ordinance. Basically standard list, right? It only calls for good cause, which is like, that's like in the eye of the whole. There's no standard to judge that against. I think there should be a standard, and the city manager should have discretion, for instance, to waive in emergencies or persons who would be significantly prejudiced. We can think about what that standard is, but I think there needs to be a standard that discretion is tested against. It shouldn't just be blanket discretion. Okay, so I want to come back to the objective noise. I'm not certain we need it, but as I said, we already have nighttime objective standards. Most of our neighboring towns have nighttime and daytime, and the benefit of having that standard is that we don't have to debate what does it mean for something to be unreasonable, right? Which is what we debate. We're going to now solve that with construction noise thing, but it may come up again. So you don't have to debate that. You just look to the standard, and if it's over the standard, it's unreasonable. If it's under, it's reasonable. So I think it makes things clearer for the community, and therefore I think it's helpful to have. If we all agree on that, honestly, then I have a lot of other things to say about what that standard should be. If the council doesn't agree that we should have an objective standard, then it doesn't really make sense to spend a lot of time talking about it. But that's my perspective. It makes sense to have a standard, and then I think there would be, in my mind, a lot of discussion about what that standard should be.
Lori?
Yeah. So, couple of comments. One, we're talking about ledge removal and the noise that it makes because it brought up chipping. The other piece that goes along with ledge removal, which was discussed that I brought up at a council meeting, I'm not sure what somebody else did, was the sister to chipping is rock crushing. And on big projects, often people bring rock crushers in when they have ledge that they remove, not by chipping, but by blasting. And it can be equally as disruptive or more disruptive than blasting. So I would encourage that be considered in this. I totally understand why staff decided to do more of a broad review rather than just chipping, and that makes sense to me. And I think that my experience, and we had the Quietest Year movie a couple of weeks ago, noise disruption is becoming a greater and greater issue in our environments as our city becomes more densely populated and people are doing more and more things. So I think it's going to become a bigger issue that we need to address. But lastly, with regard to the standards, the noise standards that we set, et cetera, understanding noise is very complicated, and none of us in this room are noise experts. In Montpelier, we have a resource that is phenomenal. We have one of the top noise experts in the nation at the Noise Pollution Clearinghouse, Les Blomberg. He has written noise ordinances for communities all over the United States. And rather than us trying to figure out whether we want to do 55 or 60, or whether we want to do LMAX, or whether we want to do A-weighted, et cetera, I would really encourage us to engage his expertise in helping us create a noise ordinance that is both reasonable and enforceable and effective for what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to put that plug in for getting real expert support in making sure that the standards that we set are really going to accomplish the goals that were set forth. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Lori. Elizabeth, did you have some comments, questions?
I guess I'd still go back to what I believe we as a council had decided was a priority, and it was not a daytime noise ordinance with a standard at this point. It was focused really on that regulatory or incentive change to limit chipping. I can't speak to, Lori, some of the other comments you made around crushing or other, practices that might generate noise with bedrock removal, but my preference would be to narrow the scope and with an evaluation of what is currently on the Planning Commission's plate, to put that in queue to make a recommendation for updates to the LDR in that specific area, and then consider when there might be an opportunity in the future to look at the entire nuisance ordinance and consider standards as it relates to a noise within the city itself. I had a chance to talk to Colin and asked him about complaints around, and it doesn't sound like the data would support. We get a lot of complaints for noise in general that wouldn't be covered in the current nuisance ordinance. So that would be my preference in terms of moving forward, because I think it addresses some specificity that we know was problematic, and focuses on the priorities we all agreed on too for this year.
May I address the council?
We're not going to take public input at this time. The council is still discussing among ourselves, and then we'll open it up. Okay? Can you just?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Mike.
I also, when I saw this on the agenda, my thoughts were exactly as Elizabeth described. I recall at the retreat, the goal was to focus on this specific issue. For the record, there was chipping in the city center. At that time, there wasn't this big push to address that noise issue. I understand there weren't complaints, and we all benefit from the city center, and those people who live in the city center are foregoing other benefits that people live perhaps in other areas, but they do get the benefit of being in the city center. But I acknowledge that is a very challenging sound to put up with. We have to do some work development, so we have to find a way to manage it in a responsible way. And for me, it's also not just of this issue. It's, we had the retreat, we came up with our 2025 priorities, and I think it's very important that we maintain our discipline. We were in agreement on what those priorities are. going beyond what this particular issue, I think will take away, as Jesse suggested, in terms of time and staff. And I would say that, we would revisit that in 2026 retreat, and if we want to add it at that point in time. But I don't think going beyond this specific issue. So I would agree with narrowing the scope, focusing on the LDR amendments. I think, as we heard Paul say, that if we do something, this is should definitely be a priority, and I would share that view. So I would say one step at a time.
Thanks, Mike. I have a question in general about the airport, right? So none of this has any relation to noises generated by the airport. Would that be a correct statement?
In the draft of the nuisance ordinance that we put forward, included an exemption for areas regulated by federal law, including airports and railroads, et cetera.
That's what I figured. Yeah, I just want to make sure of that. And I know there are people out there that are going to say that's not right, but that's a federal law exemption that we can't control. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I think even without the language in the ordinance, I don't think we'd be able to regulate. That wouldn't be something we're allowed to regulate.
Right. And the other, to Andrew's point about construction noise and about the hours, if somebody's building a house, right, the construction workers generally start those jobs at 7 a.m. So I think 8 is too late. They lose an hour of their time, because normally those guys and women, they start at 7 o'clock. They're done by 3:30 or whatever. That's the normal, working time. So I'd like to leave it at 7 o'clock. And in terms of construction noise, anybody that lives next to, obviously if you ever lived in a development and you were like the third house, and then they pulled 5 permits like they did for me and built 5 houses around me. There was, hammering and sawing and 22 gun noises to, fire nails into the foundation for many, many months. There were backup noises from trucks, deliveries of wood, stuff like that. It can sometimes seem bothersome, but when you live somewhere where there's a potential of something being built next to you, that's something that you're going to have to live with for a while, in exclusion of the chipping of ledge. I just want to make very clear, right, that is a different category of noise. If a dump truck's got to back up and dump a load of rocks, it's going to be a sound of rocks, for 30 seconds. And those things, but the other hand, right, if the crew inside the house is playing their radio super loud, then that could be underneath the nuisance ordinance, right? And you could have a valid complaint about that. The other thing I worry about is, and the chief is here tonight, maybe we could talk about enforcement, right? Because that becomes another issue, and I don't know how much time the police department has for enforcement. I don't know how many times they've actually had to enforce any of the rules that exist today. So.
I think we did talk briefly with the police department when we were considering this, and the conversation we had is, with the resources we have at the police department, this is not something that the police department is able to take on additional responsibilities for enforcement of an enhanced nuisance ordinance.
Tim, just so we're on the same page here, right? So today, there's no exemption for construction noise, right? Folks that build homes and do all the things that they need to do are within the regular provisions of the nuisance ordinance, which says you can't create unreasonable noise. What's being proposed here is to exempt all that from nuisance ordinance from the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., right? To allow all those noises to happen, notwithstanding the nuisance ordinance, as a new proposal. And so I guess, I hear you, but my perspective was that that new exemption is just too broad.
So do you want to make it, I could see 9 p.m. being too late for construction, but 7 to 5 or
I said 8 to 7. You want to make it 7 to 7? 7 to 7?
That's fine.
That would be fine too. I just think that to have a complete exemption, say at 8 o'clock at night, for people to do whatever they want.
Yeah, no.
Sounds like too much to me.
Yeah.
And honestly, the same thing for landscaping. There's no exemption now for landscaping. This proposes a new one from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. for people, landscapers, to do whatever they want, which just sounds like too much of a new exemption.
Right. Do you think 7? Well,
Well,
for landscaping.
I proposed for both 8 to 7, but we could do 7 to 7. I think would be fine. I don't know.
It's one of those things where
12 hours is a long time. I would say 7 to 5 or 7 to 6.
That's fine to me too. 7 to 6. I don't know.
Could we
I'm
get...
one that likes to sleep, so 8 to 7 sounds better to me.
I understand. But,
I like
business people start their.
But do they have to be noisy from 7 to 8, or do they get there and they get stuff going?
No, they usually
they can do lots of stuff, but
they got to start. They have to do what they do. So.
Been a builder. 7 o'clock is not unreasonable.
Yeah.
Do we even have consensus that this is moving forward?
Well, no.
And
so
I'd like to know how many complaints we get from 7 to 9 p.m.
Right. No, I understand. But we're playing with some hours of the day and our own personal, experiences with things that have happened. For example, like when they were building on Sadie Lane. They started hammering in nails, and it was throughout the whole neighborhood at 6:30 in the morning. And when I went over there at 7:15 on my way to work, I went inside, and the foreman said, "I know. The police already paid us a visit because the people next door called, right? Because it was just too early." So And Mike, did you want to say something?
I was saying we're also playing with the hours of this evening. so perhaps there's some options for us. I would agree. Should we decide where we're going with this, and that sort of gives the staff guidance on where. I think that's the objective of this effort.
Can I just say one thing about the scope? So, similarly to when I looked at this, there are things in the performance standards which really don't make sense to be there, and I'm sure that's what Colin saw when he looked at it. So therefore, that's why they're kind of proposing to make this our ordinances and our standards something that makes sense, right? I don't understand why they're doing that, and I also understand why they're expanding this to propose exemptions for certain kinds of noise, which probably should have been there in any event, because you don't want people calling at 3 o'clock and say they're hammering next door and it's disturbing my peace, right? We don't want that, and so I understand why they're expanding the scope for the things they are, and I think it's incumbent upon us. I think it's our obligation to respond to that, to make our ordinances work for the city. I don't think it's going to be a massive amount of work for us. I think we should do that. In terms of the objective standard, the daytime standard, that is a separate thing. We need to talk about that. We need to agree on that. I've said my piece. I think we should do it. I think it makes sense. But that will be another piece of work. I agree with Laurie. If we do agree to do it, it probably makes sense to have a consultant give us some advice on it. And that is another separate piece of work.
That's good.
And I just want to add one last piece, which is we in our council discussion put forward just a very narrow scope of chipping. And what I'm hearing from our professional team is that if they're going to do this, it makes sense to be broadening the scope. I think leaving it undone is a problem, and so I'm hearing that we have a recommendation from staff that we actually look at this at a broader level, and that's why I'm considering that we should move forward with it.
So I just want to clarify, I don't think that's what staff is saying. I think staff is trying to be responsive to what you were asking for and put forward something that aligned to what you were asking for, that was logical and based in science. We don't have a thumb on the scale to broaden this. I think we would be equally happy with you telling us this is not a priority right now, we're not doing anything, or you telling us go work on the performance standards and table the ordinance, or work on kind of the combined effort.
Can you also share with us that, what do we forego by doing X, Y, or Z? I mean, you started off, the memo starts off with saying this can be time consuming, this can be time exhausting. We came away with priorities for 225. We addressed the issue within those priorities was specified, the chipping issue. I assume you've staffed out time of your staff to do all those things that we prioritize. You know, we're adding something. If we go beyond the chipping, are we adding things, and are you just able to handle more, or do we forego something? Usually in life, if you do something, you have to pass on something. So I guess what are the trade-offs as well?
So we can't just do more. There's a reason that this last came up at your August council meeting, and now it's almost March. So I think, I'll let Paul speak to the priorities of the Planning Commission and where this might fit in on their existing work plan. For us, if you are choosing one of these paths, it will go in the queue and we will get to it. And there are likely other things that we will deprioritize as a result.
Paul?
I guess specific to the bedrock removal chipping, that component of it was in the council's policy priorities. And so the Planning Commission, as they developed their work plan for the year, were cognizant of that. So it's not this week, but it is part of their slated work for this fiscal year. Beyond that, and that would include any, from their perspective, that's a pretty small component to do the cleanup of removing things that might live somewhere else. So that could be component. Anything else that you ask of them, for example, if you were to task them to look at the nuisance more broadly, that would not be in scope of what they have for this year. And that would require, I'm not advocating that that's what you would do anyway, but a major change of that scale would require removing something else from their work plan.
So we all agree with that direction of the Planning Commission, right? And to move forward with that work. So we all support that. I don't know what to recommend next. I don't like the hours, the number of hours that the exceptions are for. I mean, a work day is a work day. What is a standard work day? It's like 7 to 5-ish, right? It's not 7 to 9 p.m. People who live somewhere don't want to hear construction noise up till 9 p.m. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, right? I mean, that's when people are paid to do stuff. It's usually 7 to 3:30 or 4, and they're done. So those hours are too long.
So I guess if we can just whittle down to some decision points here. So I'm seeing head nods for move forward with the Planning Commission review of the performance standards.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay.
We're talking about specific to bedrock removal.
Yep.
Or rock grind, or site
Yes.
preparation. I thought it was site preparation, right?
Actually, it was specifically chipping during construction.
No. What
I
our
don't know
memo,
if it falls differently.
well, the memo describes site preparation, which I think is the right framework.
As you're describing that, is that inclusive of bedrock removal and rock crushing, or are there more things beyond that you're thinking
Dynamite
about?
site preparation, right?
Right.
Isn't
So
it- isn't that
dynamite is removal of bedrock. So
right, but it's not just chipping.
right, and that's correct.
Yeah.
And certainly we can include looking at rock crushing because that is a related subject.
Mm-hmm.
Is that within the scope of the Planning Commission's work now? Because that's
think-
inconsistent
I
with
think
the priority.
as Lori had described, oftentimes they're part and parcel. You wouldn't do rock crushing if you weren't also doing the removal. So I think it does not substantively alter the scope of what they'd be looking at.
That was my question. Thanks.
So that's one piece. The second piece I'm hearing some interest in talking about are the exemptions and times of day. And then the third piece I'm hearing talk about is the objective daytime standards. So might it make sense, and I guess I'm looking to you all, but also to the team, the Planning Commission's reviewing form-based code, they're looking at uses, they have some active conversations happening, so I don't think that this is something that they're going to get to in March to bring you something in April. But if they get to it in this fiscal year, and we think about in parallel, once they're starting to work on it, we work on updating the draft ordinance to just look at the exemptions and times, trying to interpret some of what you talked about here, although would welcome definitive interpretation if you'd like. And and leave the rest of it to a future prioritization in the FY26 policies and strategies. Proposed
Sound good?
course forward.
It's okay.
I'm hearing nodding.
Sounds good.
Can I just confirm then, the second component they were talking about is really not going to knock something else off? Because I do believe that we made priorities for 225. The whole issue of implementing the 2024 city plan is following our priorities. I mean, that's why we have this process. And, you know, you've confirmed that the first part, even with the rock crushing involved, does not change the scope, the plan that we've committed to, and is in keeping with the retreat. Is this adding something more? And will we, you know, at the end of the year say, okay, we've done this other second component, but we have foregone X. If that's the case, I would just like to know what we are giving up in return of this, just so everyone knows.
I don't have a good answer for you for that right now. I mean, I think that's a really hard analysis to do when we have 57 priorities on the FY26 policies and strategies. You know, I would have answered that question very differently a week ago based on other emergent issues that come up. If you would like, I can go back and do that analysis, but I cannot guarantee you something is not going to fall off because we're focusing on this.
I would just ask that my colleagues always keep that in mind. We you know, there are a lot of pressing issues, but if we keep adding issues, we lose track of, are we really fulfilling our priorities that we've all committed to doing?
So, is that enough direction for you for now?
If you three of you are in agreement with
heads.
that direction.
We were nodding heads.
Okay.
I will take some public input on this, but let me just caution you that you're going to have no more than 2 minutes each. And if somebody has spoken before you that said the same thing, just say, I agree with so-and-so, if you can possibly do that. And if it's related to the airport, I don't really want to hear it tonight because we've just said that we have no jurisdiction over FAA and federal regulations. So somebody earlier did turn their camera on. Who was that?
I think Susan Gray was interested in speaking.
I'm here.
Hi, Susan. Did you
Hi.
want to say something and turn on your camera, please? And 2 minutes or less.
Yes, I'm going to say something very quickly, and that is that just by way of introduction, I live on Golf Course Road, and I live halfway down the block. Last year, I had never learned, so the issue that I'm involved in that would affect all our neighborhood is the Wheeler House, the 32 houses that are supposed to be put up there, which is very, very on Park Road, which is very difficult to imagine that many houses. And also, last year I was working at home, and Long Road, I finally found out what a crusher and the thing that doesn't stop, that keeps pounding, and neighbors were incensed, and they finally got that to stop, but after a whole summer. And to compare what's going to happen down there to barking dogs is not a good idea, because it's a huge scope. And I'm just praying that somehow you will get the noise man from Montpelier to come up, because you have all walked through that park, as I do almost every day. And Andrew, I know you take your cute dog there, and that'll be the end of all the wildlife. So as we're discussing open space and how
Susan, you're at 2 minutes right now.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Who's next? Judy?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I've attended these meetings before, and I wanted to just add something, because a lot of the talk has been about the actual site and area. I live on Fox Run Lane, And I just want to say that it's not just right by the area that's being affected. Fox Run Lane is going to be affected as well because we're in that noise zone. And so I am severely disabled with long COVID and dysautonomia, and vibration and sound sensitivity is one of my worst symptoms. And I am homebound. I do not leave the house except for doctor's appointments. So I beg you to work on this chipping issue and, that issue, and get it under control, because my life will be absolutely miserable if that is not gotten under control. But I do ask that you consider that it is not just what's happening right next to the construction, it travels, and to take that into account.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Jimmy Lees, you've got your camera on. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to add to the that the blasting is not just one blast or two blasts a day. It also involves drilling. So you have to drill an array of holes, something like 30 or 40 holes, 11 feet deep into the rock ledge. And that's where you put the explosive. So that then when you do set off the explosion, it's going to break up the rock ledge. Now that drilling uses something called, at least what they're planning to use at Wheeler Nature Park, is the top hammer drill that's even louder than the chipper. So the blasting can also have rock crushing, but it's definitely going to have that drilling that's going to be lasting all day long. Now, I think one of the things that needs to be strengthened in this noise ordinance is what they define as public places. It is defined, but it's never mentioned other than in the definition. So you have all these places that are outdoors where you could have construction very close to it. You could have ledge blasting or ledge chipping very close to it, and you're going to get enormous noise at a public school playground or on a recreation path or in any other recreation or public access to buildings and dwellings. So it isn't, people in dwellings at least have the protection of the insulated walls and roof, but many people who are going to be outdoors have no protection at all. So I think that's an important thing to include here, is to have the standard so that it protects children who are outdoors and adults who are outdoors as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Anybody else?
Yeah, hi.
Oops. Hold on.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, so hi, Beth Zygmunt. I just want to just draw attention for a minute to the comment in the memorandum that nuisance ordinances can be time-consuming, disruptive in the community, have unintended consequences on other community values, and require staff capacity. Noise of this caliber can be incredibly disruptive to the community and have tremendous consequences for the health and well-being of the people in the surrounding community. With all due respect to staff capacity, I think that this needs to be a priority. We in this community have been to numerous meetings. This issue predates 4 of the current city councilors. The only city councilor who has been on this council for as long as we've been pleading with the city to do something about this is Tim Barrett. Everyone else is new. Jesse Baker was not the city manager when this issue arose. So this has been going on for years. I'm just, again, I can't believe that 4 years later, I'm still showing up at every city council meeting on this issue and literally begging that something be done about this so that we don't have to live through this recurrent nightmare again that's right next door, that some of the other people on the call were talking about. Regarding this specific language in the proposed ordinance. I just want to say that I agree with some of the comments from the councilors that, this maximum fine of $700 a day is just not even a deterrent for a developer. $700 a day to be the fine for them to just go ahead and do what they want is really, as Andrew Chalnick said, it's just a cost of doing business. And also with regards to the allowance for a city manager, whoever it is, to waive an ordinance without a very, very specific and very well justified reason for doing so is a dangerous precedent to set. So I just want to urge the council not to put that kind of language in a city ordinance. And also, I would.
You're over
ask
2
the
minutes
council
now.
Please consider doing this quickly and making this a priority, because we are right at the brink of the season where developers are going to come and start using their equipment again. And as one of the other callers said, this is not, I mean, we have hammering going on over at Long Drive, last fall, and it was nothing. It was just bang, 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 all day long, but it was nothing of the sort of noise that comes from these excavator jackhammers and the rock crushing, the grinding and crushing of the rock. So anyway, and I also want to say that just if for whatever it's worth, as a community member, I support broadening the ordinance and doing it right the first time instead of kicking the can down the road on this. It takes so long for these things to come to fruition. It was 6 months ago when the last meeting occurred, when the council decided that they would pursue this. Here we are 6 months later, it's almost development season again, and the community here is still waiting for some sort of relief from this problem. Thank you. Thank you all for considering these measures.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? I don't think there's anybody else. Okay. So you've got direction. What to do next? Planning Commission, LDRs. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you all.
Lots of work.
Good night, all. Thank you.
We appreciate the amount of effort in that. So we now have item 12A, which is another, oh no, that's one's done. That one's done. That one was part of 12. Okay, so now we're at 13, which we're going to move. So we have to make we have to talk about this, right? So we had item 13, which was discussion and possible action, discussion of and possible approval of the city manager's annual review. We have a draft of the annual review that council has looked at, but I think we're going to defer action on this until the reorganization meeting on March 6th. Everybody agree with that? Okay, so that's for March 6th. Moving on to item 14, which is discussion and possible action, consider the approval of the negotiated agreement between the city and the South Burlington Police Officers Association for a 3-year collective bargaining agreement as presented. Colin McNeil, we have a motion right here. Yes, we are.
Can we just go into executive session first?
But you need the motion.
It's right there.
Okay. I move that the council make a specific finding that the premature general public knowledge of the council's discussion of labor relations agreements with employees could clearly place this public body at a substantial disadvantage.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Lori? He's gone.
Lori's gone.
Okay.
I now move that the board, council, enter into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1 capital B for the purpose of discussing labor relations agreements with employees, specifically the collective bargaining agreement with the South Burlington Police Officers Association, inviting Jesse Baker, Steve Locke, and Colin McNeil into session with council and Chief Burke, no? Or
Jared and Stephen.
and Jared Pelletier and Chief Burke?
And Stephen.
Steve was on there. Yeah, he was on there. Yeah.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we want to take item 18 and do the same thing? Do the most at the same time, or?
Should we just knock off 16?
So you do have to come back after item 14
Okay.
to take action.
Okay. All right.
Item 18, you don't have to vote on anything
Okay.
tonight.
All right. Let's go. So we're going to go into executive session. We'll be back. Up and down. Session on item 14, and we have a motion in front of us.
So I move to approve the negotiated agreement between the city and the South Burlington Police Officers Association for a 3-year collective bargaining agreement as presented, and authorize the city manager to execute the collective bargaining agreement with the South Burlington Police Officers Association, incorporating the amendments included therein.
Second that?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion other than thank you for all the hard work on those negotiations? We really appreciate it, and we hope that this is competitive and allows us to expand the force as needed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Good night. Thank you. Now, item 15, review the significant agenda topics below for the council's upcoming meetings on March 3rd, which is the pre-town meeting hearing, and then March 6th, which is the organizational meeting. Jesse Baker.
So I didn't bullet all of these things out because you've all now been through them. The pre-town meeting will obviously be the budget presentation with the superintendent. In the March 6th meeting, you will do all your organizational activities, elect officers, set papers of record, appoint officials. We will now add the city manager's review, and we will have a consent agenda item with a consent agenda with a few hopefully perfunctory items.
Like warrants?
Like warrants,
okay.
and we will also likely be bringing you a request to do 2 15-minute parking spaces on Market Street as Bliss B opens. So to encourage turnover.
Oh, great. Great. Okay. Thank you. Item 16, we need to convene as a Liquor Control Commission to consider the following applications for approval. Guild Tavern, first class and third class restaurant bar license. Can I have a motion to enter Liquor Commission?
I move that we convene as a Liquor Control Commission.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. We are now convened as a Liquor Control Commission. I need a motion to approve the first and third class restaurant bar licenses for Guild Tavern.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous as well. Now we need a motion to come out of Liquor Control.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We're now out of Liquor Control, and we are at 17 other business. Is there any other business? Hearing none, we will then go on to item 18, which is consider entering an executive session for the purpose of discussing labor relations, agreements with employees, and specifically the city's collective bargaining agreement with the Association of AFSIC. Hold on. It's State, County, Municipal Employees. It was American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, right?
Something like that.
Okay, something like that. And so we need a motion for that as well.
Who has my executive session?
Oh, did you? I have it.
Thank you.
So I have the. Okay. I move that the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of the council's discussion of labor relations agreements with employees would clearly place this public body at a substantial disadvantage.
So moved?
No, second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous.
I now move that the council enter into executive session under 1 VSA 313A1 capital B for the purpose of discussing labor relation agreements with employees, specifically the collective bargaining agreement with the South Burlington City Hall, Public Works, and Library employees, inviting Jesse Baker, Steve Locke, Colin McNeil, and Jace into session with council.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We will. I was just going to say that. Thank you so much. We will not be returning from this executive session back to normal sessions. So that would be a good night for everybody online. Thanks for attending. We'll see you at the next meeting on March 3rd, just before the town meeting day election.